go back down. Hand over my heart. I do this for my town. I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, my time. None of you people can tell me to stop. Yeah. I'm ready to play now. Put me in the game now. I came here to prove it. I'm ready to do it. I can't be afraid now. Put me on the stage now. I'm ready to rage now. I feel like an animal stuck in a cage and I'm ready to break out. My time, my time. None of you people can tell me to stop. This time, like the last time, you better get ready to race to the top. I'm ready to do this. Show you what the truth is. I step on the field. It's time to get real. I'm feeling so ruthless. My time, my time. None of you people can tell me to stop. Lower the lights down. Hand over my crown. Hand over my heart. I do this for my town. I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, my time. None of you people can tell me to stop. Yeah. So what are you afraid of? Those feelings are made of. Get in the game, your moment of fame. Show them what you made of. It's time that we stand up. It's time that we man up. For anyone asking who is the best, we putting our hands up. My time, my time. Nothing can keep me from reaching the top. This time, like the last time, I'm moving so fast, I'm ready to ride. I'm ready to throw down. It's time for the showdown. I'm ready to rise. Don't be surprised, I'll take on the world now. My time, my time. None of you people can tell me to stop. Lower the lights down. Hand over my crown. Hand over my heart. I do this for my town. I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, my time. None of you people can tell me to stop. My time, my time. None of you people can tell me to stop. My town, my crown. We know what it takes to be reaching the top. We reaching the top. We reaching the top. We know what it takes to be reaching the top. My time, my time. None of you people can tell me to stop. My town, my crown. We know what it takes to be reaching the top. We reaching the top. We reaching the top. We know what it takes to be reaching the top. Lower the lights down. Hand over my crown. Hand over my heart. I do this for my town. I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, my time. None of you people can tell me to stop. Turning the track up. I'm never go back down. Hand over my heart. I do this for my town. I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, my time. None of you people can tell me to stop. Yeah. I'm ready to play now. Put me in the game now. I came here to prove it. I'm ready to do it. I can't be afraid now. Put me on the stage now. I'm ready to rage now. I feel like an animal stuck in a cage and I'm ready to break out. My time, my time. None of you people can tell me to stop. This time, like the last time, you better get ready to race to the top. I'm ready to do this. Show you what the truth is. I step on the field. It's time to get real. I'm feeling so ruthless. My time, my time. None of you people can tell me to stop. Lower the lights down. Hand over my crown. Hand over my heart. I do this for my town. I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, my time. None of you people can tell me to stop. Yeah. So what are you afraid of? Those feelings are made of. Get in the game, your moment of fame. Show them what you made of. It's time that we stand up. It's time that we man up. For anyone asking who is the best, we putting our hands up. My time, my time. Nothing can keep me from reaching the top. This time, like the last time, I'm moving so fast, I'm ready to ride. I'm ready to throw down. It's time for the showdown. I'm ready to rise. Don't be surprised, I'll take on the world now. My time, my time. None of you people can tell me to stop. Lower the lights down. Hand over my crown. Hand over my heart. I do this for my town. I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, my time. None of you people can tell me to stop. My time, my time. None of you people can tell me to stop. My town, my crown. We know what it takes to be reaching the top. We reaching the top. We reaching the top. We know what it takes to be reaching the top. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. My town, my crown, we know what it takes to be reaching the top. We're reaching the top, we're reaching the top. We know what it takes to be reaching the top. Lower the lights down, hand over my crown, hand over my heart. I do this for my town, I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. Turning the track up, I'll never go back down. Hand over my heart, I do this for my town, I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. Yeah, I'm ready to play now. Put me in the game now. I came here to prove it. I'm ready to do it. I can't be afraid now. Put me on the stage now. I'm ready to rage now. I feel like an animal stuck in a cage and I'm ready to break out. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. This time, like the last time, you better get ready to race to the top. I'm ready to do this, show you what the truth is. I step on the field, it's time to get real, I'm feeling so ruthless. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. Lower the lights down, hand over my crown, hand over my heart. I do this for my town, I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. Yeah. So what are you afraid of? Those feelings are made up. Get in the game, your moment of fame, show them what you made of. It's time that we stand up, it's time that we man up. For anyone asking who is the best, we putting our hands up. My time, nothing can keep me from reaching the top. This time, like the last time, I'm moving so fast, I'm ready to ride. I'm ready to throw down, it's time for the showdown. I'm ready to rise, don't be surprised, I'll take on the world now. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. Lower the lights down, hand over my crown, hand over my heart. I do this for my town, I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. My town, my crown, we know what it takes to be reaching the top. We're reaching the top, we're reaching the top. We know what it takes to be reaching the top. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. My town, my crown, we know what it takes to be reaching the top. We're reaching the top, we're reaching the top. We know what it takes to be reaching the top. Lower the lights down, hand over my crown, hand over my heart. I do this for my town, I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. Turning the track up, I'll never go back down. Hand over my heart, I do this for my town, I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. Yeah, I'm ready to play now. Put me in the game now. I came here to prove it. I'm ready to do it. I can't be afraid now. Put me on the stage now. I'm ready to rage now. I feel like an animal stuck in a cage and I'm ready to break out. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. This time, like the last time, you better get ready to race to the top. I'm ready to do this, show you what the truth is. I step on the field, it's time to get real, I'm feeling so ruthless. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. Lower the lights down, hand over my crown, hand over my heart. I do this for my town, I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. Yeah. So what are you afraid of? Those feelings are made up. Get in the game, your moment of fame, show them what you made of. It's time that we stand up, it's time that we man up. For anyone asking who is the best, we putting our hands up. My time, nothing can keep me from reaching the top. This time, like the last time, I'm moving so fast, I'm ready to ride. I'm ready to throw down, it's time for the showdown. I'm ready to rise. Don't be surprised, I'll take on the world now. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. Lower the lights down, hand over my crown, hand over my heart. I do this for my town, I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. My town, my crown, we know what it takes to be reaching the top. We're reaching the top, we're reaching the top. We know what it takes to be reaching the top. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. My town, my crown, we know what it takes to be reaching the top. We're reaching the top, we're reaching the top. We know what it takes to be reaching the top. Lower the lights down, hand over my crown, hand over my heart. I do this for my town, I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. Turning the track up, I'm never going back down. Hand over my heart, I do this for my town, I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. Yeah, I'm ready to play now. Put me in the game now. I came here to prove it, I'm ready to do it. I can't be afraid now. Put me on the stage now. I'm ready to rage now. I feel like an animal stuck in a cage and I'm ready to break out. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. This time, like the last time, you better get ready to race to the top. I'm ready to do this, show you what the truth is. I step on the field, it's time to get real, I'm feeling so ruthless. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. Lower the lights down, hand over my crown, hand over my heart. I do this for my town, I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. Yeah. So what are you afraid of? Those feelings are made up. Get in the game, your moment of fame, show them what you made of. It's time that we stand up, it's time that we man up. For anyone asking who is the best, we putting our hands up. My time, nothing can keep me from reaching the top. This time, like the last time, I'm moving so fast, I'm ready to ride. I'm ready to throw down, it's time for the showdown. I'm ready to rise, don't be surprised, I'll take on the world now. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. Lower the lights down, hand over my crown, hand over my heart. I do this for my town, I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. My town, my crown, we know what it takes to be reaching the top. We're reaching the top, we're reaching the top. We know what it takes to be reaching the top. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. My town, my crown, we know what it takes to be reaching the top. We're reaching the top, we're reaching the top. We know what it takes to be reaching the top. Lower the lights down, hand over my crown, hand over my heart. I do this for my town, I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. Turning the track up, I'm never going back down. Hand over my heart, I do this for my town, I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop.
Fantastic. This is GT racing right now.
He's got traction, he's got everything outside of both of them. Maloney!
Oh, he's taken Anderson. Anderson's up to
Oh my God! Oh, big crash. Oh my goodness, half the field's going to get rolled.
Second very close. These guys are want to make their way through the field very quickly.
Oh, there we go. Oh no!
That's massive. This is it. This is over. I can't believe this. Oh my God.
God, what?
speedcafe.com, your number one source for all the latest motorsport news and features. Breaking news, live event updates, unprecedented global motorsport coverage, performance motoring news and reviews, all in the palm of your hand, anywhere, anytime. Speedcafe.com, first, fast and free.
The Sunday afternoon GT3 Eseries now has the backing of the biggest independent motorsport news website in the world. Good afternoon, everybody, right around the globe. I'm Lachlan Manson. Welcome to round number one of the speedcafe.com GT3 Eseries presented by Kincrome. We're going to have 6 rounds at some of the world's most iconic motorsport venues and some of the best professional racing drivers in Australia, competing against some highly skilled amateurs in high-performance GT3 machinery. It all kicks off this afternoon at the iconic Indianapolis road course. Joining me in commentary for this series will be Bo Albert. And Bo, in the initial GT3 E-Series presented by Carbon Gaming, we had some epic races. Now, with the backing of the biggest motorsport news website in the world, it's only going to get bigger and better.
Oh, absolutely. Last season, we saw some of the best racing in sim racing that you will see just about all over the world. It had some fantastic finishes just about every round that we covered. And now it's even bigger, it's even better. The entry list is absolutely stacked. We've got new rules, new regulations, but overall a very similar format to make sure we've got the exact same ingredients for another fantastic season.
So, as mentioned, it will be a total of 6 rounds. We're at the Indianapolis road course this afternoon. The series will also make visits to Spa, to the Nürburgring, to the Le Mans circuit, to the Daytona road course, and then it will conclude on the 5th of July at Mount Panorama Bathurst. Most of the races will be 90 minutes in duration. However, the Le Mans and Bathurst races will each be 2 hours. And like you said, it's a massive field of entries that are lining up for their chance to compete against some of the top professional drivers in Australia. So many drivers on the entry list, in fact, that not all of them are going to get a start in this afternoon's main race. In fact, we've got about 150 cars that are attempting to qualify for just 50 grid spots. So what's happening right now is we've got 3 qualifying sessions running concurrently, and it will be the top 50 drivers that will make it through into the main race. Here's a look at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, scene of the Formula One World Championship US Grand Prix from 2000 to 2007. It's also been the scene of 6 IndyCar races, and it's been the scene of the US MotoGP from 2008 through to 2015. So it's a circuit that's steeped in international acclaim, and it's a circuit that's going to test all of our GT3 competitors this afternoon.
Absolutely. When it comes to Indianapolis Motor Speedway, everyone immediately thinks that beautiful yard of bricks at the start-finish line. And for these drivers, it's not quite the Indy 500. They're going the wrong way around the circuit. As you can see, a very large braking zone into turn number 1. It's a tight, it's a technical circuit. And for these drivers, especially those in the mid-engine cars, it's going to suit them quite nicely because it is a circuit that requires flow, commitment, and precision as well. You need to drive the car very, very smooth, very carefully around this circuit. The curbs aren't too large, feel free to use them, but there's a lot of slow speed corners, so don't overdrive because just like you saw there, it's very easy to get tripped up, make a little mistake, and it is a relatively short lap as well. Drivers lapping around 1:24 around this circuit, so one little error on your lap, it will pay massively against you and you will lose a whole bunch of spots. So making sure you hook up every single corner, every exit, every brake application is oh so critical.
Looking at Jackson Stoozle and Harlow at the moment, he was one of the formed drivers in terms of speed in the Carbon Gaming GT3 E-Series in the previous season. Didn't actually get a race victory in that season though. We saw that he was involved in a couple of incidents, particularly in the most recent round at Phillip Island last weekend. So, like I say, we do have qualifying at the moment. The group that we're watching, this is the group that has got all the high-profile drivers, but there are 2 other sessions running in parallel with this one. So what we'll do, once the sessions are completed, we will combine the times from the 3 sessions. That will give us our grid for the 90-minute race that's coming up. Now, just like in real life, though, we do have a balance of performance formula to make sure that all of the different cars are evenly matched in terms of performance. So we've got 6 different cars in the field: the Ferrari 488 GT3, the McLaren MP4, the Mercedes AMG GT3, the Audi R8, the BMW Z4, and the Roof, which is basically the GT3 spec version of the Porsche 911, although it's not actually branded as a Porsche per se. And by working with the minimum weight of the cars and also the amount of engine power, the series organisers have been able to balance out the performance to ensure that all of the cars are nice and level, because we want the results of the races to come down to driver ability rather than who has the best car. One of the other things that we'll talk about, Bo, once we get into the racing, is fuel strategy. There have been a few subtle tweaks to the regulations regarding fuel and the amount of fuel that drivers are allowed to start with, and also the amount of fuel that they're able to put in their cars during pit stops. We'll cover that off when we get into the race. What it does mean, though, is that once again we're going to see races where there'll be plenty of strategic variation.
Absolutely. This is not a series where it's always the fastest driver that wins. It's a series where sometimes to get to the checkered flag first, you've got to be the smartest. And so many times last season, we saw races decided about not what they did on track, but what they did in the pit lane. Do you take tyres? Do you double stint the tyres? Do you elect to short fuel the car and save where you can? Or do you go for the maximum amount of fuel you can take and burn it all in a hunt to chase down the cars in the front? It's a fantastic series for that element, where you are constantly guessing who is going to be the driver that comes out on top, because at the end of it all, at the end of all the final pit stops, it's a completely scrambled field, and it's not what you would always think. There's always a driver out there that's willing to do something just a little bit different, a little bit left field compared to the rest of the drivers, and sometimes that is what allows them to spring a shock result.
I'll be interested to see how the different strategies play out, and like you say, one of the best things about this series is that it does incorporate that strategic element. You've obviously got real-life drivers like Shane Van Gisbergen and Andre Heimgartner, who have got a lot of experience in real-world race strategies where they'll have engineers back in the pits calling the shots. But you get into a situation like this where you've also got some highly skilled amateurs. And one of the things that we saw in the previous season of the Carbon Gaming GT3 Eseries, Bo, is that driving fast is not good enough to win the race. You also have to be able to think on your feet, read the play of the race as it pans out, and to be able to adapt on the run, making critical, spontaneous decisions about whether or not to come into the pits, how much fuel's put in, whether or not to change tyres, so on and so forth. So it does give those highly skilled and ambitious amateur drivers some experience at the strategic side of managing a motor race.
Absolutely, and for some of these drivers, I know some will have some engineers helping them on the sidelines as well, but for a lot, a vast majority in fact, they actually won't have anyone spotting for them. So like you say, it is actually the drivers that are making these split-second decisions while driving at 250 kilometers an hour around the high banks of Indianapolis. They're trying to think, should I short fill, should I take tyres, what should I be doing as Shane Van Gisbergen aborts this provisional lap in the Team Redline BMW Z4 GT3. Currently 12th at the moment, so he won't be too happy with that. He'll be looking to progress a little higher up the order, but absolutely, being able to think on your feet in this series is so critical, and especially when we get safety cars, because safety cars are an element in this series. If one of them pops up, all kinds of race strategy is oftentimes thrown completely out the window.
Well, in all of the races that we called in the previous incarnation of this series, there were at least 2 appearances, weren't they, from the safety car. We know that there's mandated to be at least 1 competition caution at some stage during the race, but if what we saw in the last round at Phillip Island is anything to go by, you could have anywhere up to 3 safety car interruptions over the course of the race. So the way that the drivers respond to those safety cars will prove decisive in the overall outcome of the race. Now, we do have some great sponsors on board, as of course, once again, a big thank you to speedcafe.com for coming on board to back this series and give it some fantastic exposure right around the world. But we've also got Kincrome, manufacturers of high-quality automotive tools, putting up some fantastic prizes for some of the standout performers in this series. Tonight's prize for the overall amateur winner, so the highest placed amateur driver in the field, they'll be taking home a portable automotive toolkit that contains 85 essential tools for any startup automotive expert. And there's pictures of that up on the Speed Cafe website. It is certainly a great prize for whoever ends up being the highest placed amateur driver tonight. The overall highest placed amateur driver in the championship will receive a fantastic 281-piece 14 draw tool kit from Kincrome's Evolution range, and that kit will be delivered directly to the winner's home and will come with the bonus 2-draw sign locker as well, and that is valued at a cool $2,500. So a fantastic prize on the line for the highest placed amateur driver in the speedcafe.com GT3 Eseries. And again, giving the amateur drivers those sorts of tools, it's the kind of thing, Bo, that will help them potentially make the progression into real-life motorsport.
Absolutely. It's one of those things that can very much be used as a learning tool and a learning experience as well, being able to get your hands around a spanner and being able to know exactly what you're doing, because it does have a lot of valuable life skill lessons that can be taught and will help you develop overall into the real world of motorsport, like you say. So I think that is a fantastic prize being offered. And I know plenty of drivers here, they obviously want to do well in the series, but the fact that that kind of prize is being offered is just a little bit extra motivation for them to practice, work hard throughout the week, and make sure they get the maximum results they can every single Sunday night, because that is something everyone will be gunning for.
Bit of housekeeping to cover off as well. So Phillip Island last week, we left the broadcast for what was the final round of Season 1 of the Carbon Gaming GT3 Eseries. Not exactly sure who the race winner or the champion was. You'll remember, Bo, that there was an incident quite late in the race where Jeff Connell made contact with the back of Andre Heimgartner heading into MG Corner. That was the subject of a post-race investigation, and we did suggest at the time that Jeff Connell looks like he may have been the guilty party. And you know what? The officials agreed, because they handed down post-race time penalty to Jeff Connell. He was stripped of the win. That was handed to Ethan Arps. He ended up being declared the race winner. In terms of the championship, even though he didn't actually participate last weekend, Shane Van Gisbergen still ended up being declared the series champion. So just thought I'd get that housekeeping out of the way just to wrap up things for the opening season of the Carbon Gaming GT3 Eseries. But if we get that sort of controversy and those sorts of talking points in the races in the Speed Cafe series, I can tell you that the journalists at speedcafe.com are going to have plenty of content to write about.
Absolutely. There were more than enough headlines in the last season, so I can't wait to see what we're going to do this season with even more rounds. The drivers definitely know how to keep us entertained. I'm sure the Speed Cafe riders will find that out very, very quickly indeed, because this series does always produce a little bit of controversy, a little bit of drama as well. I think that's one of the reasons we do love it oh so much. It's a fantastic series, and Season 2, like we've already alluded to, is going to be even bigger and better. So I'm very excited for what the season holds.
So looking at Macaulay Jones on screen at the moment. He's one of the professional drivers in the field on board the Cool Drive Mercedes AMG GT3. And Macaulay Jones, of course, has been competing in the Supercars A-Series as well, along with his Supercars Championship rivals. So good to see Macaulay Jones out on the track. Good chance that his teammate from Brad Jones Racing, Todd Hazelwood, will be making an appearance throughout this series as well. So Macaulay Jones, one of the pro drivers in the field tonight. At the moment, in this session, it's Jackson Suzel and Harlow who's fastest, ahead of John Martin in second position. Jordan Pruden, who was a race winner at Monza in season number 1. He sits in third position, just ahead of Jamie Craig. Shane Van Gisbergen, who was struggling to get a clean lap together, has improved and moved up into position 5, ahead of Jeff Connell, the driver who was the subject of so much controversy at Phillip Island. And then it's Andre Heimgartner, back to Jack Boyd, Lockie Hughes and Michael Gurry rounding out the top 10, reiterating again, Bo, the results from this qualifying session are very much provisional, and we will have to combine them with the results from the other 2 qualifying sessions before we can come up with our final grid positions for the race.
Well, I've actually just noticed something a little bit interestingly. Sorry to move across from your point there, but Shane Van Gisbergen, like you alluded to, has ended up improving his time and gone to 5th place. Over the start-finish line on his fast lap where he set that 25.0, there was a very, very major lift-off on the throttle about probably 200 meters before the finish line, and that would have cost him quite a significant amount of time. I'm not entirely sure why he decided to lift off. He was at 260 kilometers an hour and would end up crossing the line at only 190. So I don't know if that's some kind of mind games or something happening from Shane van Gisbergen here, but he's up to a little bit of strategy already early on.
If it was real life motorsport, I could be very cynical and suggest that he was sandbagging so as not to get hobbled by any balance of performance adjustments that might happen to the cars between qualifying and the race, but I don't quite think that that's the case in this particular instance.
No, so a little bit odd for Shane van Gisbergen, especially in qualifying, where of course the aim is to get as fast as you can and get high up as the leaderboard as you can, and the amount that he was lifting, I wouldn't be surprised if it did cost him about half a second, so that would have put him right with Jackson Susan-Harlow. So while the timesheets right now may suggest that Jackson has a very comfy 2 and a bit tenths over second place John Martin, there's a couple of competitors here who are playing mind games, and Jackson is not running away in this session as much as it might appear at first.
So one of the cool things is that we are actually going to be fed live race control updates, so we're hearing that Michael Gurry, I believe it is in car number 6. No, it would actually be the other Gurry entry in the field. There are a couple of drivers with the surname Gurry, but that's Craig Gurry, in fact, currently sitting in 40th position in one of those Roof RT12R machines. He has been adjudged by our live race control stewards to have impeded car number 31 of Stephen Ellery, and as a result, he will be starting the race from the rear of the grid.
Yep, so already one penalty being handed down. And we did see that a little bit last season as well, where drivers would impede someone in qualifying and would very quickly face the wrath of our live stewards, who we do have a fantastic team working behind the scenes to provide race control for us, which includes Dalton Ellery, Kyle Grinch, Sam Batty, and of course Sam Blackrock as well. So a great crew working behind the scenes in this series to make sure that the driving etiquette is all clean, fair, and adjudicated for if there are any kind of issues. So a big credit to them working behind the scenes in this series. It's a big task with 134 drivers taking to the field in round number 1, and already drivers are giving them a little bit of homework to do.
Had a good chat to Dalton Ellery earlier on today. He's, of course, the son of Stephen Ellery, the former Supercars driver in his privately run team, which had the Super Cheap Auto sponsorship for a number of seasons. He also spent a season driving for the AAA Motorsport team in 2005 when he was Craig Lowndes' teammate, and he has finished on the podium in the Bathurst 1000 on a few occasions as well. Stephen Ellery, good to see his son Dalton getting into the racing scene, not just in virtual racing, but in the real world, where he's been doing some competition in Hyundai XLs as well.
Yeah, plenty of drivers with a lot of real-world experience, so plenty who are very, very well equipped to do well in this series, as the checkered flag will fly in qualifying. A couple of drivers just finishing up their very last lap times at the moment. Jackson Susan-Harlow is one of those drivers to come across the line. Will he be able to improve and stamp more authority on this series? Currently on a 24.6, he does a 24.8. That lap time is still good enough to go to pole position, even though it was slower than his current fastest time. So he has got a lot of pace in the Logitech G Altus Esports Audi R8. John Martin is going to find his way across the start-finish line. Will he close the gap anymore to Jackson Susan-Harlow? The answer is he's been exploring the track limits a little bit too much, and whilst it may seem a little bit obvious, so to say, just for those that are wondering, if you are found to be corner cutting or track extending in any way, shape or form during qualifying in this session, your lap time will be deleted, just like in the real world. So you don't have to worry about any kind of Mario Kart grass cutting to gain lap times. That's not the case. These drivers have to follow very strict rulings, and Andre Heimgartner is trying to find a little bit of gain in that Mercedes AMG. 2/10 slower. The time was not in his favor. The track temp going up just a little bit since the start of the session, currently lying at 23 degrees track temp and 19 ambient. So he's having that to deal with just a little bit, as one of our drivers goes for a rather substantial incident there, but a lot of aborting their laps right at the end here. So many thinking the track temp just a little bit too much and nothing forthcoming in lap time. So we've got our results up on screen, and it will be Jackson Susan-Harlow provisionally, of course, in our first session that we are looking at on pole position. There are more sessions going on at the moment, so we can't confirm that it's Jackson on pole. But in this session, he will end up fastest ahead of John Martin, Jordan Pruden, Jamie Craig, and Shane Van Gisbergen for your top 5. Jeff Connell in position number 6 with Andre Heimgartner and Jack Boyd 7th and 8th. Lockie Hughes and Michael Gurry, your top 10.
Good thing for me there is that we've actually got 4 different manufacturers inside the top 4, so the balance of performance seems to be working pretty well so far. We look a bit further back. Jack Cathode in 11th position ahead of Dalton Ellery. Daniel Yeaman in 13th position back to Michael Hammers. Paul Auditore in 15th back to Macaulay Jones. Jeremy Clark, James Foster, Ben Dahlia and Oscar Target, a couple of youngsters rounding out our top 20.
21st in this first session, we do have Eddie Beswick with Ben Blaze in 22nd. Kobe Williams and Nathan Hearn, 2 drivers we saw plenty of last season, and they're back for some more with Jaden Draper in 25th. Ethan Arps in 26th, a very familiar name after his great effort at Phillip Island. Scott Short in 27th, Rain Campbell, Zach Nickel, and Shane Edgar, the top 30.
Then it's back to Mitch Campbell in position 31, Jonathan Bykoff in position 32, back to Stephen Johnson, Tyler Collins, Stephen Ellery, and then Eli Donaldson, Willie Yarwood in the 37th. Good to see Beric Linton in the field in position number 38, the Australian production car driver and reigning Bathurst 6-hour winner. Fraser Ross in his McLaren in 39th position. He's a real-life Australian GT Championship driver, and Craig Gurry completing the top 40.
And our last 2 cars to set a lap time includes James Simpson and BJ Kennedy. So 42 cars in this session setting lap times to try and get themselves into the 50 grid slots available for today's race. But of course, there are more sessions going on at the moment, or have just completed as well. We haven't got their results right now, but we'll have them very, very shortly, Lockie. And that's going to spice the grid up a lot, and we'll see just who has made the cut.
Hopefully we'll have a chance to have a chat to 1 or 2 of our drivers from that qualifying session very soon. While we're waiting for that to happen, let's just talk about strategy. So we know that it's a 90-minute race, but what the organisers have done is that they have restricted the amount of fuel that the drivers are able to have in their cars at the start of the race. So they've worked it out, and full credit to Dalton Ellery and also Jordan Pruden, who've done a lot of work on this in the last week or so, but they've made it so that each car can go for about 27 minutes in the first stint. When they come in for a pit stop, they can put more fuel in, up to about 58 minutes. Now, if you add 58 to 27, you end up with 85 minutes, which is 5 minutes less than the total length of the race, being 90 minutes. However, we know that there are going to be safety cars, so obviously, if you save fuel under safety car, there is a chance that you can still get through the race with just a single pit stop. However, it might still work out better to do 2 pit stops, because then you can spread the tyre wear more evenly across a couple of sets of tyres, and it also means that you might have a shorter pit stop to make later in the race. So a lot of that's going to be dependent on where the safety cars fall, but once again, just like we saw in Season 1, Bo, it's a really, really interesting potential for a whole lot of different strategies to play out.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing how exactly the drivers approach it, especially in round 1, because obviously as the season gets on, everyone gets an idea of what's working and what's not. Round 1, everyone's coming up with their own ideas, and things are a little bit different because no one has any reference on what's going to work best compared to maybe previous races. So I think tonight in particular, we're in for some very, very interesting strategy calls, and I think that could make a fantastic race right down to the final minutes, which, if you didn't see anything from Season 1, every race we broadcasted, Lockie, came down to those final minutes.
We had a few grandstand finishes, that was for sure. I think one of the other things as well, so we've talked about the fact that the drivers have to think about tyres, they have to think about fuel, but they also have to think a bit about risk minimisation. And you think back to the last round at Phillip Island, where Jackson Suzlin Harlow, he had a fast car. He was on a strategy that on paper looks like it was going to work really well, because he had fresh tyres near the end. He had enough fuel to get to the end of the race without having to conserve. But because he got himself into a position where he was in the mid-pack at one of the safety car restarts, it made him very much exposed to the drama that can unfold in that congested mid-pack. And in the end, it works to the detriment of Jackson Suzlin-Harlow because he was caught up in an incident late in the race which knocked him out of contention.
I mean, that's the thing, is it's all well and good having the fastest car on track. That's always a nice thing to have. But when you've got a major checkup because there's 30 cars in front of you on a restart, cold tires, everyone's trying to be cautious around one another. If you're 31st, in that pack, you don't have the room or the space to use that pace advantage that you have. You are stuck and you have to pass that 30th place car, the 29th place car, the 28th, the 27th, and so on. Whilst your race leaders who might be on a slightly worse strategy, they've got clean air, they don't have to pass anybody, they can afford to just skip away into the distance.
So great to have your company right around the world. For those of you who are tuning in on the speedcafe.com website, the event is being broadcast live thanks to speedcafe.com. Very, very exciting that we're able to broadcast the event through what is the world's largest independent motorsport news website. Just having a look to see if we've got any drivers waiting to be interviewed. Doesn't look like we do at this stage. And we're just hearing as well that in one of the other qualifying sessions that was not broadcast, Gary Hamilton punched out in 1 minute 24.5. So that actually eclipsed the time of Jackson Suzlin-Harlow. Actually, we're being told that it was Craig Edwards. So, yes, so Craig Edwards will end up on pole position. The other driver who punched out a pretty quick time in one of the sessions that we didn't broadcast was Job Stewart. And we know that he's one of the young stars of the sim racing scene because he performed very well in the Erebus Esports Junior Academy competition as well. So we've got some very exciting talent up the top of the field. The interesting thing for me there, Bo, just looking at those results, apart from the fact that it's so close between the front drivers, is the fact that it's actually the amateur drivers who have outclassed the professionals in that qualifying session.
Of course, in many regards, this is the amateur driver's home turf. This is sim racing. This is what they're used to. And as much as we do like to simulate real racing and get it as close as we can, there is always a little bit of an element to where having experience behind a sim is going to pay dividends. That's why you might see a Shane Van Gisbergen, who's been doing sim racing for absolute years at this point, is very, very quick and can translate his real-world pace onto the sim, perhaps better than a Macaulay Jones, who is still very, very fast on the sim, but with that less experience that he has, isn't quite able to match Shane Van Gisbergen, whereas we know in a supercar in the real world, he is able to get a whole bunch closer to SVG. So having that experience, I think, is helping the amateurs just a little bit punch out some very, very fast lap times. So I can't say I'm too surprised to see them go 1, 2, 3.
So we already touched on Kincrome and the support that they've thrown behind the series. Our safety car sponsor for the Speed Cafe GT3 Eseries is networkcafe.com.au, which is a new initiative that's part of the Speed Cafe empire, as it were. And it's a project that, thanks to Crusher, as we know him, Brett Murray and the team at Speed Cafe, has become a support mechanism for the motorsport and automotive industry and its suppliers, sponsors and organisations. And basically, it's an opportunity for small and medium-sized businesses to have the opportunity to advertise their products and services to a vast audience free of charge through an easy-to-use portal, networkcafe.com.au. We'll talk about it more when we do have the networkcafe.com.au safety car on the circuit over the course of this race. If you're wondering why we've got a bit of a delay at the moment, it's because it does take a bit of time for our series organisers just to amalgamate the lap times between the different qualifying sessions and come up with our grid positions. Other thing that's worth mentioning as well, Bo, is that there'll be the one broadcast race this afternoon. For those drivers who weren't quite quick enough, for those who missed out, there will be another, let's call it a B-main race held for those drivers as well, so that even though they might not get to compete in the main race, they still get the opportunity to go out there, have some fun, accumulate some experience, and maybe, just maybe, they'll have the opportunity to qualify for the main race next week.
Well, absolutely. So we do have that B-main sort of feature, and for the amateur drivers, there will only end up being about 27 spots for them to slot into alongside our real-world drivers to make it a field of 50. So to make it into that final cut is fairly difficult. And I'm sure if they do miss out tonight, they will be having plenty of fire in their belly for round number 2 to work harder and punch out a lap time that will get them into the main show. Because obviously this is the main stage everyone wants to be in. The more a spotlight is on you and the more prizes on offer, it's going to get more and more competitive. So for more drivers missing out, it is a shame, but they still get to enjoy the race in a B main, like you called it, that will be happening at the same time as the A main.
While we're talking about some of the most talented sim racing drivers in Australia, just wanted to touch on the results from round number 3 of the Porsche Esports Super Cup, which was held at Donington last night. There are 4 Australian drivers competing in the Porsche Esports Super Cup, which is regarded as the pinnacle of international sim racing competition through the iRacing platform right around the world. It attracts some very, very high-class drivers from all over the globe, and Dane Warren, your Altus Esports teammate, came into the round as the championship leader. However, he had a pretty tough night and he's actually fallen down the championship order. However, that has allowed another Aussie, Josh Rogers, to move to the top of the points table after he chalked up another pole position. In fact, he's had a clean sweep of fastest qualifying performances so far in the Porsche Esports Super Cup, and backs that up with a couple of very solid race results as well. Your thoughts on the Porsche Esports Super Cup last night, Bo?
I thought it was a very interesting race, and obviously we did have a couple little mind games going on in qualifying with Sebastian Job able to snatch that eventual reverse inverted top 8 grid pole. So he managed to start in second from that and got past Alejandro Sanchez very, very quickly. And from there, it was a very dominant performance from the Red Bull Racing Esports driver, who many are predicting to be the eventual challenger to Josh Rogers, who leads the championship. Like you said, Rogers ended up finishing 4th in race number 1 from 8th on the grid, and then moved that up to 2nd in race number 2 in the main feature, but wasn't quite able to match the pace of Sebastian Job. So our Australian's doing well, but has a very large fight on his hands. But I quickly want to say as well that at one point during qualifying, once everyone had set all their provisional times, apart from the last handful of drivers, it was at one point all 3 Australians who were competing last night in Dane Warren, Josh Rogers, and Josh Anderson, all 3 of them did end up getting inside the top 10, which was a great moment and shows just how good sim racing in Australia truly is. Jared Filsell unfortunately did not make it to the grid in the Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup round number 3 at Donington Park, but I'm sure he would have been right up there as well. So our Australians on the biggest stage in sim racing right now, with over $200,000 in prizes up for grabs and a beautiful Tag Heuer watch as well. They're representing us very, very nicely.
You talk there about Josh Rogers, who is regarded as one of the best, if not the best sim racing driver in Australia. He has actually relocated over to Europe, over to Germany, to pursue his sim racing career, where he lives in a gaming house as part of the Coanda Sim Sports organisation. And it just goes to show how seriously sim racing can be taken at a top level, that there are now these professional opportunities on the line for the very top sim racers in the game. And I think for Josh, the chance to be over in Europe, the chance to be sharing a house with other like-minded individuals, but also the opportunity to be living in a time zone that's a bit more friendly for some of those international events, gives him a pretty good opportunity moving forward.
I think that is a point that is often overlooked when it comes to the high-level series that are run, is for us Australians, is we're often waking up at ridiculous hours of the night to make sure we can compete. And obviously for Josh Rogers, who was doing very, very well in that, being able to actually have a correct time zone where he can wake up and be fully aware of what he's doing. He can have a proper routine in the morning, have his breakfast, and, you know, just have a normal beginning to the day rather than waking up at 1 in the morning for a race. I think the actual impact of that is often understated, and it's a huge advantage for him to now be able to compete at a proper time zone and be able to do a correct warm-up method that otherwise he would have been able to do. So, of course, sharing a house with these teammates, which includes the likes of Mac Backham, I believe Jeremy Bootsloop and David Williams are over there as well. It's fantastic to see that sim racing is getting to that point, because we've had our major esports organizations, let's say Cloud9 and Liquid, who are massive in the esports sphere when it comes to Call of Duty, CSGO, and other platforms. Now we're getting sim racing to that level as well, so it shows just how good this is getting and how good the professionals are that they can actually do this and source income for a living.
Let's not forget too, the other thing that we probably shouldn't understate here is the internet connectivity and transmission issues. Now, it's probably not quite as much of a problem in motorsport as it is in some other e-sport competitions, but when you do have a bit of a delay in transmission when you're competing against people on the other side of the world, it can sometimes create a few headaches. And we saw it with the Supercars A-Series when Max Verstappen was competing, and there were a few netcode issues where he made contact with other cars just because of that lag, that slight delay in time because of the data transmission from one side of the world to the other side of the world. So if you're going to be racing in events that are prominent or predominantly hosted on European servers, it probably makes sense to be based in Europe just to minimize those sorts of technical issues.
Absolutely. It's something that will only really pop up when you're in close combat with another driver, when you're maybe rubbing doors very, very close, where that kind of issue can pop up. And it is unfortunate to see, and iRacing are doing a fantastic job in improving it every single day. But of course, the fact is, limitations are limitations, and there is only so much that they are able to fix that. And it is just one of those things that sadly, with the ping difference, as they call it in Australia, does make things very, very difficult for us in particular to race against Europeans without there being a little bit of what we call desync and the cars not lining up on screen absolutely perfectly, and perhaps misjudgments can happen, and sometimes that does lead to accidents, unfortunately. So for Josh, now being over in Europe, that now allows him to race closer to his competitors without any fear of maybe rotating a car around him or causing an incident. So for Josh, that's a bigger advantage for him to be able to really attack the rivals exactly how he wants to.
For those of you who've just joined us here on speedcafe.com, we are counting down to round number 1 of the Speed Cafe GT3 Eseries presented by Kincrome. Start of the 90-minute race is not too far away. We're at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. This weekend we should have been watching the 104th running of the Indianapolis 500. We're not, but don't despair, because we've got a very exciting 90-minute GT3 race coming your way very soon. And not only that, Speed Cafe are also going to be broadcasting an encore performance of Will Power's 2018 Indy 500 win. So you'll be able to relive the first win for an Aussie in what is regarded by many as one of the world's greatest motor races. Let's have a look at our race conditions. Sky partly cloudy, current air temperature locks to 18 degrees Celsius, current track temperature 38 degrees Celsius, and it's calm, just 3 kilometres an hour, the wind speed from the southwest. And as we have mentioned, it will be a timed race, 90 minutes in duration.
Yeah, it will be. But that track temp I find very, very interesting to say, because of course that is going to be hurting the tyres a lot more than if it was a cool track. So for these drivers, that's just another element in whether or not they take tyres or not, or if they try and double stint the tyres throughout the entire 90-minute race. That's a big deciding factor now that they've actually had to deal with that. So very interesting, and it is actually rising as well. So just in the time I've been sort of ranting or whatever you want to call it, it's going up another degree as well. So for these drivers, this track, it's going to be very challenging. It'll be very slippery, and they're going to be working overtime tonight.
And it's here at the Indianapolis circuit, because it is clockwise in direction, it's predominantly the left-hand tyres that will receive the majority of the punishment that's dished out to them, particularly through the 2 fastest corners on the racetrack, turns 12 and 13. Cast your mind back, Bo, to the US Grand Prix in 2005, when we had that very controversial race that only ended up being started by 6 cars. What was the reason behind the controversy that weekend? Tyres. They're definitely going to be a talking point in this race this afternoon.
Oh, they always are when it comes to Indianapolis. Perhaps a bit of a touchy subject, I will admit, for some, especially when it comes to that 2005 US Grand Prix. But the tyres we are using on our GT3 cars are not the manufacturer in question. So thankfully, we are all safe for tonight's race. And hopefully, it's a very good one as the drivers begin gridding up. And it is quite a field indeed, with 50 GT3 machines getting ready for a rolling start. And there is your grid on screen, Lockie.
Craig Edwards on pole, Jackson Suzlin Harlow alongside him on the front row. Job Stewart and John Martin positions 3 and 4. John Martin, the highest placed of the pro drivers. Jordan Pruden out of position 5. Back to Robert Crysdale in 6th. Jamie Craig in 7th position. And then it's Shane Van Gisbergen ahead of Jeff Connell and Matt Lupino rounding out your top 10.
So Mitch McLeod in P10 there. Matt Lupino kicking things off from P number 11 with Andre Heimgartner sharing that 6th row of the grid with him. Luis Paulo Gallen, a very experienced driver when it comes to this kind of racing, will kick things off from 13th on the grid. And we then have a massive field that includes Jeff Rahali, Jack Boyd, Chris Owen, Chris Lazarevich, Dale Breed, Lockie Hughes, and Michael Murray for your top 20.
Go back to Jack Caffone, who starts the race out of grid position number 21. Good to see Dale Breed in the field tonight. There's a blast from the past. Tyrone De Silva out of position 22 ahead of Ryan Healy. Dalton Ellery back to Race Cohen. Tom Katsidonis out of position 26. Daniel Yeaman in 27th. Michael Hammond back to Paul Auditore. Macaulay Jones and then Jeremy Clark in position 31.
Wayne Harrison Watt kick things off from 32nd on the grid. He's got James Foster right behind with Ben Holiday and Zach Hanlon, your top 35. Zach will have his teammate and team manager Simon Feigl for company in 36th. Jane Ransley from 37th. Benjamin D'Alia in 38th. James Glasspool from 39th. And Dean J, your top 40 with Brad Clank 41st.
And we keep rolling on through this massive field of GT cars. Oscar Target, the young gun, out of position 42, ahead of Eddie Beswick. Back to Kane Thornhill, Daniel Bennefield, Ben Blaze, Zach Nicole, Fraser Ross in 48th, ahead of Stephen Johnson. And then it's Stephen Ellery out of 50th position, Kyle Greck in 51st.
So there is our very stacked field of GT3 cars. They're heading their way around their pace lap at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It's a BMW on pole, which is a very interesting thing to see, indeed, being such a power circuit. But these BMWs clearly enjoying that, because look at your top 5. It is filled with BMWs. Only Jackson Suzlin Harlow in the Audi R8 looking a little out of place indeed, with the other German manufacturers all around him at the moment, as their drivers are getting ready to head onto the banking for the very first time. And when the pace car pulls in, the control will fall to Craig Edwards to get this race underway. Craig on screen there in the very white and purple BMW. Lockie, take it away.
So Craig Edwards ready to control the pace of the field at this start. He'll have the inside running heading down into turn number 1. And like you say, it's Jackson Suzlin Harlow, the lone Audi Ranger, in amongst a sea of BMW machinery in the top group of cars. We've also got Mercedes in the field. We've got some McLarens, we've got some Ferraris, we've got some roofs in the field as well. Safety car in pit lane, speedcafe.com. GT3 Eseries underway at Indianapolis. And a beautiful start from our pole sitter Craig Edwards. He's going to go straight to the race lead. Jackson Suzlin Harlow already having to defend on the run down into turn 1 from some of the cars that are coming ranging up behind him. And in fact, Jackson Suzlin Harlow is going to lose second position. We hold our breath as the field files their way through that first corner. We know that that's a trouble spot with having to brake and slow the cars quite significantly for that very tight right-hander.
The good news is that all 50 of our GT3 cars look to have made it through at the moment. A fantastic effort from all involved, but a great start from Job Stewart for Pursuit Sim Racing, flying through the order on Jackson Suzlin Harlow. So Jackson in that lone Audi loses a spot off the line in a BMW 1-2. Plenty of battling happening in your mid-pack, as you can see, side by side. There we go onto this little back straight short shoot before we head into the alternate version of the US Grand Prix. What was originally hairpins is now a bit more of a S section for these drivers, and they're all doing very well at the moment, holding it single file. You can see Matt Lupino on screen in that very nice looking Audi R8. Plenty of chrome on there as well, which is a very take clearly working for him right now, as he finds himself moving up the order. Shane Van Gisbergen, P number 7 in the BMW as well. Looks like he's made the correct car choice, so he is going to be trying to move forward. The next target for him is the headlight flashing roof of Jamie Craig.
Jamie Craig, yes, in the first of those roof entries, and he's putting the pressure on Jordan Pruden, who's just in front. But it is Craig Edwards who leads the race. Job Stewart, as you mentioned, very good start, was able to get ahead of Jackson Suzel and Harlow as they headed through turn number 1 on the opening lap. And it's been a very racy opening lap indeed from Job Stewart, because he's now starting to close the gap to our race leader, Craig Edwards. Very well behaved start, I have to say. Not the mass carnage that we have seen in some other events in recent times on the iRacing platform. So a good job from the drivers. They know that it's a long race. They know that it's not about trying to win the race in the first lap or the first 2 or 3 laps. It's about buying a ticket to the last 15 or 20 minutes.
Absolutely, and right now the first 15 minutes for Craig Edwards is proving a little difficult, running very wide through the hairpin, and Job Stewart sees that and smells blood at this point early in the race, working lap 2 only, and already is not happy with P2. He wants P1 instead. He is looking a lot more comfortable in that car compared to Craig Edwards, who's just sliding around a little bit and not perhaps in the rhythm that he would like to be. He had a very nice original launch, did Craig Edwards, but from there, Job Stewart looks like he's got a little bit more confidence in his early stages, where, let's not forget, the tyres aren't up to pressure. They're only just getting up to racing operating temperature. So the tyres are moving around a whole lot more, and Job Stewart has a major slipstream, and I'm not going to get too excited about this because this is going to look all too easy as he pulls alongside for your race lead on lap number 3. He will go late on the brakes into turn number 1, and Craig Edwards has absolutely no response there.
No, well, Craig Edwards didn't even bother to fight that position too hard, because Job Stewart had the move virtually completed even as they exited that Banks left-hander at turn number 13. Got a great run through the final 2 corners and was able to set up for what was in the end a very easy passing manoeuvre down the inside of Craig Edwards into turn number 1. Back in the Pack 1 driver, not having such an easy time of it though, is Jeff Connell. And we've already got a safety car on the circuit, so less than 4 minutes elapsed in this race, and we're already going to have our first appearance for the networkcafe.com.au safety car, which is going to come out onto the circuit and bring the field under control.
So we'll try and discover what exactly this has occurred for, because right now I'm a little bit lost in regards to what this will be, but a safety car does come out, and for those that aren't actually aware, this will be a manual safety car. So you can see Kyle Gresh coming out on the circuit now in that gorgeous looking Porsche Cayman with the beautiful networkcafe.com.au branding on the side. That will pick up your race leader of Job Stewart, and we'll see what goes on there as the pit entry is closed. Pit entry is closed, and Craig Edwards cuts across the grass. Now we'll see what the stewards think of that. Of course, that is rejoining the circuit in a very dangerous spot. And Jackson, Susan, Harlow had to jump on the anchors there to avoid that. But yeah, a few of us are a little bit lost in regards to what has happened. I'm just looking at our standings on our screen, and I can see a couple of drivers have lost a significant amount of spots. Michael Gorry lost 24, Mitch McLeod has lost 36, and Tom Katsadonis has lost 21 as well. So perhaps one of those drivers was the cause of this safety car, and they have lost a whole bunch of ground. But for those wondering who perhaps our biggest gainer of this start would be, that would go to Zach Nickel from 30. He's currently 33rd from 47th on the grid. That's a fantastic opening run for a Zach Nickel, and if he can continue this progress, he'll be up the front in absolute no time.
The interesting thing for me here, though, is that we've not had any pit lane visitors. Having a look at the timing screen at the moment, well, not only that, but nobody has sustained any sort of damage in the opening couple of laps of the race. So, you know, typically, particularly in races where you've got large fields, you'll often get a few cars that might sustain a bit of damage in the first lap of the race and have to come into the pits to have it addressed. But all 50 cars that have started the race, not one of them has come into the pits yet. So the driving standards overall, you would have to say, have been exemplary in the early stages of this race, which is fantastic to see.
Oh, absolutely. Of course, we have seen some very aggressive moves happening earlier in the races in previous rounds in our Season 1 of this series, but fortunately, this season has been a lot cleaner and the drivers very well behaved. And if that's what we're going to get all season long, which I sure hope it is, then we are in for quite a treat indeed. So well done to all the drivers, all 50 of them, to make their way through the opening laps involved. And we are obviously struggling a little bit at the moment as we have a look at Oscar Target on screen there, the youngster who's currently working his way under safety car. 32nd place at the moment. We'll see how high up he can end up at the end of the race, because currently up 10 spots, which is a fantastic effort indeed. But in this series, for those that aren't familiar, we do often get a random safety car that will come out at a random designated point in this race. We're not seeing any incidents, so maybe the random safety car has come out nice and early tonight.
So Oscar Target, who we saw on the screen just before, great feature story and video of him on speedcafe.com earlier in the week. He's a young gun who has had some experience in go-karts and looking to use sim racing to further his professional racing ambitions. So great to see him, one of many young and talented drivers who are part of the field tonight. He's our race leader, Job Stewart, ahead of Craig Edwards, Jackson Suzel and Harlow third. And then it's John Martin, Jordan Pruden, Jamie Craig, back to Shane Van Gisbergen, Robert Crysdale, Andre Heimgartner, and Matt Lapino rounding out the top 10. So John Martin, Shane Van Gisbergen, and Andre Heimgartner, they're all pro drivers. The rest of the cars in the top 10 are all being driven by amateur competitors at this stage.
Which is a fantastic thing to see. Obviously, the amateurs doing very well indeed. So more of them doing that, and we've got a very competitive season on our hands for other prizes at the end of the season. But just quickly, I want to note the safety car is only going to be a nice and short one. It'll be in at the end of this lap, and control will go not to our pole sitter Craig Edwards, but new race leader Job Stewart, who was fantastic off the initial start, managed to have plenty of pace. And we'll see if he can continue that on the second restart, or if Craig Edwards can perhaps just use the safety car to reset himself, refresh, mentally get himself back in the game, and if he can be the aggressor and not the one having to play a little bit of defense. The safety car is pulled away, and all we're waiting on is Job Stewart to unleash the Pursuit Sim Racing BMW Z4 onto the high banks of Indianapolis Motor Speedway, holding 90 kilometers an hour, and the field gets nervous. They get anxious, the heart rate rising, waiting for that leader to pull away. And when they do, the rest of the field has to react into a very hard braking zone into turn number one. It's an exciting one, and we are back green here for round number one of the Speed Cafe GT3 Eseries, and it's a great launch. Craig Edwards not expecting that, not able to go with your race leader. So far, so good. Everyone looks spread out. Shane Van Gisbergen, very aggressive already, trying to make a move on Jamie Craig, and will do so. As you can see, a couple of drivers getting very feisty, trying to make a gain in this opening restart of the race. So we'll see how they all go, and so far so good. It still looks pretty clean. So these drivers doing a fantastic job at the moment, as one driver does get a slowdown. We've got another driver off the circuit. I believe that might even be John Martin.
It is, and that was contact from Jordan Pruden into the back of John Martin's car that saw him getting rotated off the racetrack, and Jordan Pruden has gone off at the next corner as well. And in fact, he's back in the pits with damage, so they were squabbling over what would have been positions 4 and 5. They've made contact. John Martin gets shuffled back to 15th position. Jordan Pruden, a race winner in season number 1 of the GT3 E-Series, is back in for an early and unscheduled pit stop to get some repairs.
That's not ideal at all, especially when it is so early in the race. In fact, he has now exited his car and will call round number 1 quit. So I said that it was going to be tough for him to actually regain that time up, but it is still possible. If we get another safety car, you are able to gain a lot of time back. But unfortunately, Jordan's saying the damage is all too much, and he will not take any further part in this race. If you have a look at Andre Heimgartner, siding his way past Jamie Craig, who has not had the best restart, lost the spot to SVG, and now another Supercars driver as well. So Jamie Craig in that rough, the very interesting Lego liveried car, sadly can't put the pieces together at the moment.
Look at them all fanning themselves out on the main straight, ducking to the inside to try and break the slipstream of the car behind. And yeah, you're right in terms of Jordan. Sorry,
Tyrone De Silva is around at turn number 1. In fact, a big check of cars going left, right, and center, trying to avoid that incident. You can see there, big drama. And now Simon Feigl as well turned into a spin. So a lot of drama happening on this restart. Simon, unfortunately, in the McLaren, not been his day. I can see another car off the road as well. So sadly, one of them was actually Steve Johnson. So Steve, sadly, not enjoying his return to sim racing as we get a motor simulation replay up on screen, Lockie.
So Tyrone De Silva ended up parked in a very awkward position, facing head-on into a pack of oncoming cars. We'll pick up the replay and work out what happened to De Silva. So coming through turn number 2, copped a tap from Ryan Healy. That was what caused De Silva to end up parked in the wrong position. And then Simon Feigl caught in a terrible position on the outside. Actually, that was a completely separate incident. So he copped a hit from another competitor, and that's what sent the McLaren backwards off the racetrack and into the gravel trap. So the driving standards at the initial start were pretty good, but since the safety car intervention and the subsequent race start, we have had a few dramas, we have had a few incidents. Like you said, Jamie Craig, not a fantastic race start, but he is staying on the tail of Andre Heimgartner at the moment. The biggest mover since the race start, in the top 10 at least, has been Shane Van Gisbergen, because he gained the spot on Jamie Craig immediately at the restart. Then he got 2 more bonus positions when there was the collision ahead, and we've got more problems. Chris Lazarevich off the road at turn number 1.
And also, second place, Craig Edwards off the road as well. So your driver, who was the pole sitter, has now had a nightmare. And Shane Van Gisbergen's off the road as well. John Martin got around the hairpin. There is all kinds of chaos now kicking off on lap number 8. What has gone on here to a number of cars? We're going to need a replay of this, because not only is second place gone around, the biggest mover since the restart, just like you said, has also gone around.
Unbelievable. So they were obviously battling over position, all of those drivers. So looking at Shane Van Gisbergen, he's lost it all on his own.
So is Craig.
Unbelievable.
Both of those drivers have done it all by themselves. Craig went off by himself, and so did Shane Van Gisbergen. We'll get a look at John Martin when we can as well, to see if perhaps it is 3 cars. It's 3 cars, unbelievably, having solo car incidents by themselves.
If it was a real-life race, you would ask the question if there was oil or debris on the circuit in that particular corner. And John Martin almost reversing into the back of Shane Van Gisbergen as he rejoined the racetrack. So that has completely jumbled up our order at the front of the field. So Job Stewart continues to lead. Jackson Suzlin-Harlow back up to second position. He's 2.5 seconds off the lead. Andre Heimgartner has now climbed to third spot ahead of Jamie Craig. Louis Paul O'Gallen up to fifth ahead of Jeff Rahali, Chris Owen, Jeff Cotton, Jack Boyd and Lockie Hughes now your top 10.
All kinds of changes are happening at the moment. In fact, we've even got a couple of drive-through penalties, one of which goes to the 34 car for a dangerous re-entry. So a couple of drivers facing the wrath of the stewards, and that driver will be Daniel Benefield. So his return to iRacing not going in the way he would have liked in serving his drive-through penalty at the moment. So he may want to go back to other sims if that is how iRacing is going to treat him at the moment. Dangerous re-entry, you can't be doing that. But at the moment, Job Stewart, has an enormous race lead, and he is flying away currently 2.5 seconds clear of Jackson Suzlin-Harlow, and last lap around was actually 7/10 faster. So whatever Job Stewart has found in that BMW, he is making very good use of it.
So Jamie Craig, who we saw have a pretty sluggish restart there after the safety car, wants to get some of those spots back, and he's putting the pressure on Andre Heimgartner at the moment. We're a quarter of an hour into the race. We do expect that these cars will go around or maybe just under half an hour in the first stint based on the amount of fuel that they had on board at the start. Keep in mind that they will have saved a bit of fuel under that safety car intervention, but it'll be another probably 10 to 15 minutes before we see the first round of pit stops.
With that safety car that we did have, like you say, it will obviously extend this opening stint of the race just a little bit. So these drivers will have a little bit more fuel to burn at this point in the race, and that will play into their strategies a little bit more, especially those who are trying to do something a little bit different. In particular, as we have one of the BMWs going around, Ben Holiday has a nightmare just in the background of shot there, sadly for him, in the BMW sponsored car. Gets back on track fairly cleanly though, and will begin trying to regain some lost time. After that, as we have a look at James Foster, who was in a battle with Zach Nickel, who has been a massive mover in this race. 22 spots now gained for Zach Nickel, so a great effort there to find his way so high up the order.
Cast your mind back to Phillip Island last weekend, where we saw that just by staying out of trouble and by making the right strategy calls Ethan Arps ended up in the position where he was able to win the race. Came from pretty much nowhere. I think with 20 minutes to go, he was in position number 25. But just because he'd done such a good job of managing the strategy, making sure he had a good set of tyres on his car at the back end of the race, but more importantly, avoided getting caught up in a lot of the shenanigans that claimed so many of the other front-running drivers, he was able to snatch the win. Often, it's better to not get involved in too many ferocious contests, particularly this early in the race. Just focus on staying out of trouble, making sure you don't sustain any unnecessary damage. And like I said before, buying a ticket to the last 15 or 20 minutes.
How many times have we heard that sentence and seen it play out absolutely perfectly? Drivers that perhaps are just lurking around the midfield or outside the top 10, do something a little bit different, buy themselves a ticket to the final few laps of the race, and all of a sudden they put themselves in an almost race-winning position. It's just an absolute theme of this series at the moment, and that's why it is so unpredictable and why we love it oh so much. Having a look at Shane Van Gisbergen at the moment, and as we move our way back up the front to Jamie Craig at the moment, who is putting up a massive fight against Andre Heimgartner, who originally was pulling away a little bit, but now Jamie looks like he's got the rough switched on a lot more, looking to the right side into turn number 1, a little bit too far back to make any kind of move happen, but Andre can't be feeling too safe at the moment with the Lego car right behind. They get past one of the laps cars of Jeremy Clark, who was a big competitor last season and fighting at the front in a lot of cases, but sadly tonight isn't going to be his day in race number 1 of the new season. But yeah, Jamie Craig, he's definitely found something in the second half of the race, as we see Jaden Ransley now into the pit lane, and no real damage on this car from what I can see, so maybe a bit of an alternate strategy being played here, and maybe he's banking on a new pit stop at the or a new safety car before the end of the race.
Well, like I said earlier on, theoretically it's very much possible to get through this race on just one pit stop, but depending on safety cars and track position and all of the other variables, including tyre degradation, it could still mean that 2 pit stops works out to be a more effective way to get to the end of the race in the shortest amount of time. And I know that it sounds a bit counterintuitive making 2 pit stops when you only need to make 1, but with safety cars, where and when they fall, you can get a lot of the time back. And if you can time your pit stop so that you have a shorter pit stop later in the race, and you can get yourself into a position where you have fresher tyres later in the race, that can work to your advantage. So a lot of decisions to be made by all of these drivers, and we'll start to get an understanding of exactly who's doing what in terms of strategy in probably the next 10 minutes or so.
You only have to think back to Barcelona, that we broadcasted last season, where Jackson Susan Harlem and the Audi R8 did not take tyres. Shane Van Gisbergen hunting him down did take tyres, and at the end of the race that proved all the difference. So tyres versus no tyres is definitely something these drivers have to be weighing up very, very carefully, because it can make so much of a difference at the end of the day. We take a look at John Martin at the moment, and a very good looking BMW Z4 livery. I have to say, I do quite like that. He's got Ryan Healy in front, who was of course involved in that incident on the safety car restart that caused a little bit of chaos in turn number 2. So Ryan will be looking to put that behind him and get a very nice result at the end of the day. But a good little battle here, which includes also Zach Nickel and Ben Holiday behind. Zach Nickel, one of our biggest movers and shakers, and Ben Holiday, a driver that's been involved in a little bit of carnage already today, had that spin earlier on, and is now trying to find a bit more ground. And James Foster, a regular in this series, in a very different looking car this season with the Kincrome sponsorship, but I've got to say it looks absolutely gorgeous too.
Big shout out to Ben Holiday though, because at 12 years old, he'd been one of the very youngest drivers in the field for this race. We saw that he competed in the Erebus Esports Junior Academy as well, and he is only 12 years old, so fantastic to have him as part of the field, mixing it up with some older drivers. There's Dalton Ellery on screen. He's one of the series organisers. In fact, you'd probably describe him as the main series organiser for this GT3 Eseries. And he's on board one of the roofs at the moment. And has he had a bit of a moment? I think maybe he has, yes. Just a bit of a mistake there from Dalton Ellery. Takes a bit of an excursion and goes the long way round.
I'm a big fan of rallycross, so I totally support Dalton's decision there to take the Joker lap. It's something I wasn't quite expecting to see in this race, but nonetheless, he makes good use of it and finds himself in 18th spot, losing as little time as he absolutely necessarily had to. Macaulay Jones on the screen there in the very familiar Cool Drive livery Mercedes AMG. 21st spot at the moment, so a little further down than he would be happy with. But we'll see what he can do over the next couple of hours, well, a little bit over an hour now. An hour 8 remaining in this race. So already 22 minutes down, and these drivers will be starting to feel the pressure, but also at the same time, be getting into a rhythm. Jeff Rahali, though, his rhythm is a little bit out of whack as he finds himself in a bit of trouble. Daniel Yeaman also off the track in the Audi R8. So the Audi's beginning to bite some of their drivers. And that is just a common theme of this series. These Audis, very tricky to drive, Lockie.
They're very heavily reliant on mid-corner speed to produce their lap times, and they are able to carry tremendous mid-corner speeds, especially through some of the higher speed corners, but they're also extremely twitchy, and once the rear end of those cars lets go, it doesn't give the driver a lot of feedback or a lot of notice to be able to react and correct the slide. So once the Audi starts to go, it's pretty much gone before you've got any chance to do anything about it. And a moment here for Jeff Connell as well, who was running in 7th position at the time, but he's had a big slide there, and he falls back to 8th position in behind Jack Boyd.
Yeah, that was actually a very aggressive attempt and overtake there from Jeff Connell. He tried to slide it up the inside of Chris Owen, who left a little bit of a gap on the inside, and he went for it, but sadly the door was always going to close. I don't quite think he was up far enough either, and sadly contact was made in the Mercedes this time, coming worse off as we take a look at Chris Owen, who is under quite a fair bit of pressure at the moment from Jack Boyd in the Gone Rogue Audi. And we'll see what Jack Boyd can do. He's a driver that's very, very regular in the Australian racing community, but very rarely do you see him in a GT3 car, so a bit of a new experience here for Jack.
He's been doing a lot of racing in the TCR cars lately. We've seen him competing in the Circuit XL Eseries on Saturday nights. We've seen him do a bit of stuff in supercars as well in the various series, but having a solid run so far aboard this GT3 Audi R8.
Definitely a little bit different to his TCR car, but nonetheless not stopping his confidence on the brake pedal. Just gets right up to the back of Chris Owen, who is a driver very familiar with high downforce equipment. It's actually one of the slowest cars that Chris will actually drive when it comes to sim racing. So if your slowest car is a GT3 car, you know you're pretty comfortable with some very fast equipment. He taps the brake pedal a few times there, and we'll see if Jack Boyd is able to make any kind of capitalization on Chris just using the brake pedal a little more than he has to. But sadly, in this tight infield section, overtaking passes are very, very limited, and his best shot is going to be into turn number 1, coming off the oval as well. So for Jack, he's got to try and make a move somewhere else on the circuit. This first part of the lap isn't paying any kind of rewards.
Just having a look at the lap times at the moment. So the top 3 cars in the field all did virtually identical lap times last time around, 1:25.5. Fastest driver on the racetrack at the moment, Craig Edwards, our pole sitter, who has worked his way back up into the top 10 after that spin that he had just after the safety car restart. 1:25.0. So he's lapping about half a second quicker than our race leaders at the moment, but he is almost 17 seconds off the lead of the motor race. Shane Van Gisbergen, the other driver who's starting to recover from those dramas a bit earlier on, he's climbed back up to 12th position.
Yeah, so a nice little recovery there from Shane Van Gisbergen. The only problem for Shane right now is the car in front of him is quite some way in front of him as we have a look at Craig Edwards there, who's trying to sneak up the inside of Jeff Connell, and that's very late on the brakes, actually overshoots the actual turning point just a little bit there, does Craig Edwards. Fortunately, he holds on to the track, and will be able to make that spot happen, as we can see also up front, Robert Crusdale has to find his way past the driver, Jeremy Clark, who is just a lap down as well. Modem simulation replay up on screen, and what we will do is take a look at the incident, or a bit of a battle here between Chris Owen and Jack Boyd. Jack gets up the inside there into his very long right-hander. It's just a sequence of right-handers that feels like it's never going to end, and he made that one look fairly easy in the end. So a swap of positions there between the two that were fighting earlier on.
Good job there from Jack Boyd. So he stalked Chris Owen for a couple of laps, planned his passing manoeuvre, worked out a spot where he had a bit of a strength compared to Chris Owen, and was able to make the move through. So Jack Boyd up into 6th position. 2.8 seconds the margin between first and second at the moment. Andre Heimgarten's just fallen back a bit. He's now almost 7 seconds off the lead of the race and still under big pressure from Jamie Craig as well. This battle's been going on for a while, but Heimgarten hasn't been having to drive ultra defensively per se. It's just that the two cars at the moment seem to be very, very evenly matched in terms of performance. As we have a look at the webcam view for Jamie Craig. Now, he is a real-life racer, Jamie Craig. We see him competing in state-level competition in the New South Wales Pulsar Racing Series. He's had a lot of experience and success in go-karts as well, but in terms of national-level competition, hasn't really raced anything at a national level in real life. And like all of our sim racers, looking very, very focused at the moment on board that Lego car. I reckon that's definitely one of the contenders for best livery of this series so far, the Lego car. It looks absolutely fantastic.
I can't disagree with that. I think it's a really nice livery. It stands out quite a lot. I was actually just looking before. I think compared to Season 1, we seem to have a distinct lack of SpongeBob liveries, which is a bit of a shame because they were almost becoming a bit of a staple of the series more than anything. But I know, definitely for the Lego car, very, very nice livery. And Jamie Craig just tucked up behind Andre Heimgarten. This will be helping him quite a bit because he's able to save fuel when he's stuck behind there. And for Stephen Ellery, I've seen a lot of pit angles, but that's a new one for me.
What sort of angles do we call that? It's not 45, oh, it almost is 45 degrees actually. So turned in at the very last minute there to get his pit stop done, and that might be a bit awkward when he then has to exit the pit lane later on. You can see that that car was jacked up as well, so Stephen Ellery electing to take a new set of tyres. We are rapidly approaching the half-hour mark of this race, so it won't be too long before we see a flurry of pit activity based on the starting fuel loads for all of these cars.
Absolutely. So for those that weren't here for us at the start of the race, of course, these drivers have a different starting fuel load compared to what their maximum is. So they're allowed a maximum amount of fuel in their tank to fill up in their pit stops. Before the race starts, they're actually only able to use about half of that. So their first pit stop will come a lot earlier in the race if they do decide to take 2 pit stops. But typically what you'll see is a driver pit a little bit after the half an hour mark in the race. And then on this new set of fuel loads that we're using for this series, you might actually be able to squeeze that fuel that you get in the pit stop all the way to the checkered flag. So we'll see what some drivers do. But at the moment, I don't see too many fuel saving, and that's not too surprising because overall, this is a very difficult track to fuel save because there's not that many overall massive braking zones, maybe only 2 in the series. Craig Edwards is taking something very, very different in regards to strategy. He's going to pit on lap 19. We're not at the half an hour point in this race right now. It's into the pit wall. Unbelievable. Your pole sitter has made a massive error. Race ending just about. The engine up in smoke. Motum simulation replay up on screen. And Craig is going to be livid with that lock here.
So coming into the pit lane, obviously it is quite a high-speed pit exit, but it was as he brakes to try and get the car slowed down to the pit lane speed limit that it squirmed sideways and it's gone head-on into the wall separating pit lane from the racetrack proper. And what should have been a fairly short, efficient, scheduled pit stop is now going to be a very long pit stop to repair a lot of damage to that car, as we've got Jackson, Souza and Harlow in the pits in the Porsche Esports Audi R8 as well. So the pit strategies, just as we suspected, starting to shake out for this first round of pit stops.
What Craig has effectively done in this pit stop has gone to his B car. So what these drivers are allowed to do as our race leader is taking the trajectory to find his way onto pit lane. We might just watch this for a second because the BMW does appear to get thrown around on the bumps quite a lot. The car was moving towards that wall, wasn't it? But did not quite get there. But back to my point, Job Stewart, the driver of Craig Edwards, has effectively gone into his B car. So these drivers have 2 cars to use for the race. And a little bit like old school Formula 1, if you do wreck your main car, your primary, you do have a backup you can go to. So he's in that now. He won't lose too much time overall, so don't be surprised to see him still right up the leaderboard come the ends of this race, but definitely unfortunate and would have lost a lot of time reversing out of the pit wall.
Yeah, just as well for Craig Edwards that fast repair's available, actually. So the pit lane stop time for Craig Edwards, 39.4 seconds. Very long stop for Jackson Suzel-Harlow. He was stationary in the pits for 68 seconds, so you can only imagine that Jackson Suzel-Harlow has taken on a full tank of fuel and 4 new tyres, with the pit stop being that long. And we've got a hive of activity in the pits now with Job Stewart, Robert Crysdale, Shane Van Gisbergen, Jeff Connell, Andre Heimgartner, Lewis Paulo Gallen, Jack Boyd, Chris Owen, and Lockie Hughes, and a whole host of others all hitting pit lane. And that leaves Jamie Craig in the roof as the race leader at this stage.
Yep, so Jamie doing a very nice job staying out on track at the moment with the fuel load he had. And of course, he was behind Andre Heimgartner for plenty of laps, so was able to save a little bit extra fuel. But at the end of the day, not that much, because he is going to have to dive into the pits on lap 21. And right about there, there's a big bump. You can actually see that visibly on the on-screen, well, the onboard camera. And that is throwing the drivers around quite a lot under brakes for the pit lane entry. So actually, we're being a little harsh to Craig Edwards. It looks like a very easy thing to do. And I'm always surprised that more drivers aren't getting caught out by that at the moment, as Craig Gurry does take this pit stop, which should give the race lead back effectively to Job Stewart, once the likes of Brad Clank also come in to take their pit stop. Steve Johnson there is getting passed around the outside. He's looking a little off the pace at the moment. Is he coughing? That car looks like it's coughing, and his revs are awfully low. I think Steve Johnson may unfortunately be running quite dry on a fuel tank here.
So often you want to try and stretch the first stint as far as you can, because it means that you can do shorter stints later on, but it looks like Stephen Johnson has tried to stretch that first stint just a bit too far, and his Mercedes has ground to a halt, so he'll be getting a tow back to the pits. I mean, obviously that will be some costly time lost there for Stephen Johnson. So just a bit of an update on the pit lane activity now that we've had the first round of pit stops completed. So Job Stewart will emerge back in the lead of the race, as you said. His pit stop is 40.9 seconds. All of the cars in that lead group have had pit stops around the 40 to the 42 or 43 second bracket, but then you've had some cars that have taken much longer pit stops significantly. Jackson Suzel-Harlow and Robert Crysdale, they both spent over 60 seconds in pit lane. Jeff Connell, Shane Van Gisbergen, and Lockie Hughes, 3 other drivers who also had very long stops. So I would suggest that the likes of Suzel-Harlow, you can add Jamie Craig to that list as well. They're the drivers who've decided to take a fresh set of tyres at this first pit stop.
Yeah, there is quite a lot of drivers that have ended up going for that strategy, which is a little surprising. In fact, I'm actually looking at it. Looks like we've had about 18 cars decide not to take tyres, and then we've had the complete rest of the field, so 31 other cars ended up didn't end up taking tyres. So a very different split in strategies there, and we'll see how these drivers do pan out with that, because of course, if there is a safety car that comes out at any point in this race now, the drivers on old tyres are going to struggle quite a lot against those who have decided to put new boots on.
Correct. And we would imagine as well that, so what was it? It was about 58 minutes, I think, worth of fuel that everybody was able to put in their cars at the pit stop. So most of the cars in the field are probably going to be right to get to the end from here. There might be a couple that are a bit marginal, maybe some of the ones that stopped a couple of laps earlier for their first pit stop. The bulk of the field, they will be fuel to the end from here. So now it does become a case of tyre strategy. The highest placed of the cars that has taken a fresh set of tyres will be Jackson Suzel-Harlow. He sits in 6th position, and he is 28.5 seconds off the lead. So he needs to hope that the gain that he's going to get from those new tyres will allow him to make up that 28.5 seconds based on being able to punch out superior lap times to the cars that are ahead of him on the racetrack.
It's a difficult question to know around this circuit whether tyres are going to be such an advantage or not, because of course it's not a circuit that features a large amount of corners. Overall, it's a bit of a power circuit, especially when it comes onto the final corner and heading onto the oval section of the lap. So for these drivers, it's about the opening section of the lap, the opening 5-6 corners, where the tyres are really going to benefit you. For the rest of the track, I don't know. I think taking no tyres might be a bit of a smart strategy here. Of course, the track is fairly warm, 36-degree track temp still in this race. If you have a look at Shane Van Gisbergen on screen, what has happened here for SVG? Runs a bit wide. I've got to say, I think he's serving a slowdown penalty there.
So he is one of the drivers on fresh tyres, and we know that this is the scenario that Shane Van Gisbergen likes to be in, where he is on a fresh set of tyres and he can go on maximum attack, chasing down cars ahead. But just thinking back to season 1 of the GT3 Eseries, so we had a bit of a mixture, didn't we? Because at Barcelona and at Phillip Island, new tyres were a decisive advantage, and we saw at Barcelona in particular that Shane Van Gisbergen on a fresh set of tyres was able to charge his way to the front of the field. Conversely, at Monza, tyre degradation was a fair bit lower. And again, we saw that Shane Van Gisbergen took a new set of tyres at his final pit stop of that race, but on that occasion, he wasn't able to get enough of a lap time gain to be able to hunt down Jordan Pruden. So in that instance, the decision to take new tyres turned out to be the wrong strategy. So, like you say, Bo, it very much depends on the amount of tyre degradation, which is going to vary from circuit to circuit. And here, as you've suggested, it's a bit tricky because there's not a lot of fast corners, particularly through the infield section, as we see Jeff Connell off the road, but you do have those sweeping right-hand corners, turns 12 and 13, leading back onto the main straight, which will put a fair bit of load through the left-hand side tyres. So it will be very interesting to see whether or not new tyres prove to be the way to go.
Well, we're going to find out, that is for sure. At the moment, one of the fastest cars on circuit, Jackson Susan Harlow, in position number 6 last time around, took 0.6 of a second out of Job Stewart. And what's the difference there? Jackson's on new tyres, Job Stewart is not. So 0.6 of a second at the moment is the margin being taken out by Jackson Susan Harlow. Only 0.3 on this particular lap this time around. So Jackson needs to be taking a bit more out of Job Stewart's lead though than that, because that is not going to quite get you there in time at the end of this race. We're still looking at about 37 laps to go. But for Jackson, if he's only taking 0.3 a lap, you're not going to close down a gap of 27.5 seconds.
The other driver lapping in the 25s at the moment is Jamie Craig. So his last time through was a minute 25.6. So he was even quicker than Jackson Susan Harlow by a couple of tenths of a second. So Susan Harlow, Craig, you can add a few other cars. Robert Crysdale, you can add to that list as well. And also Shane Van Gisbergen and Lockie Hughes, who are a bit further down the order at the moment. They're the drivers with the advantage of fresh tyres. And as you mentioned there previously, Bo, where the fresh tyres will really come into play is if we get a safety car that bunches up the field and it evaporates the margin of those drivers who are elected not to change tyres during the pit stop.
Absolutely. All it takes is one safety car. Everyone bunches up, and that 27.5 second lead that Job Stewart has over Jackson Susan Harlow, who's the first car on a new set of tyres, well, that gap comes down to probably about 2 seconds. But then the issue, of course, comes. Jackson has to clear the cars in between himself and Job Stewart to get to that race lead. So again, traffic could be the deciding factor for Jackson Susan Harlow. But right now, traffic is not the deciding factor because he has 27 seconds, and currently no safety car is looking like it's going to happen, because so far the driver's doing a great job at keeping things clean on circuit. So that safety car, well, Jackson may have to do a little bit of a rain dance at the moment to make it happen.
With the way that the safety cars have fallen at the moment, I actually think that we'll probably see the majority of the field only making the one pit stop, even though that I suggested before that 2 pit stops might be an option, particularly if it runs green until the end of the race. We know that pretty much all of the cars are fueled to the end, so they can probably get home from here. The only people who might think about doing another pit stop is if we do get another safety car later on, if you're further down the field and you didn't take a set of tyres at the previous pit stop, you might decide to come in, do another one, bolt on a fresh set of tyres and give yourself a chance of making up some late race positions. But if you're towards the front of the field, you wouldn't do it because you're going to lose too much track position. So I think that it's probably a fairly straight out race from here through until the checkered flag.
Well, I mean, that's it. If the drivers while leading this race, if there is another safety car and they haven't taken tyres, they're kind of locked into their strategy, because whatever they might do by pitting on a safety car and taking new tyres is probably going to hurt them more than it's going to help them. So the fact they haven't taken tyres in their first pit stop, they've kind of locked themselves in now at the front of the field, and this is what they've got to work with, and they've got to make whatever they've got last to the end of the race in the fastest possible fashion they can. So Looking forward to seeing how this pans out as we have a look at Oscar Target on screen. Doing a fantastic job right now. He's going to drive Michael Burry and Mitch McLeod in front of him, so not a bad two drivers to have leading you around this circuit.
Job Stewart's done a sensational job so far in this race. He really has controlled it from the front, got to the lead very early at the start, and has been able to pull away from there. Andre Heimgarten, 10.5 seconds, in fact almost 11 seconds now, and drift in second position. Lewis Paul O'Gallen's done a good job as well, qualified outside the top 10, but has moved up to third position. Jack Boyd fourth. Craig Edwards, he will be thanking his lucky stars that he had that fast repair so that he didn't really lose any time, even with that crash coming into the pits. He scored in fifth position, but did not take tyres during the pit stop. And then it's Jackson Suzlin Harlow, the best of the cars on fresh tyres, sitting in sixth position ahead of Jamie Craig, Reece Cohen, Paul Auditore, and then Jeremy Clark in 10th position. But Jeremy Clark's a bit out of sequence here because his last pit stop was almost 21 laps ago, so he will have to do another pit stop. He won't have enough fuel on board to make it to the end.
You mentioned there the fantastic job that third place Luis Paul O'Gallen is doing at the moment. Of course, for those of you who have been watching the SimSpeed GT broadcast for oh so long, will know that's probably not all that much of a surprise. Luis Paul O'Gallen, one of the fastest sim racers in a GT car that you will find, always super quick, always finds a way to the front, and you can see there making a bit of a move there on lap traffic Steve Johnson. Not often you'll say a lap traffic Steve Johnson, but in this case, Luis Paul O'Gallen does put him a lap down. Luis, super quick. Put him in a Ferrari, he'll go quick. A Mercedes, he'll go quick. A McLaren, he will still find a way to go nice and quick. So Luis doing a great job. 12 seconds, 12.9 seconds off your race lead provisionally, but are doing a very strong pace, especially when you consider Jack Boyd behind is losing 0.6 a second, at least last lap around. So Luis doing a great job right now in P3 and 10 spots gained. That's a fantastic effort.
Everything's just settled down a bit at the moment, hasn't it? After that initial first 10 or 15 minutes or so where we saw some big overtaking manoeuvres and a few incidents, and we had that safety car as well. And then obviously we've had the round of pit stops since then. Everybody is just dialing themselves into a rhythm at this stage, and Job Stewart has actually responded to the lap times that were being set by Jackson Suzlin Harlow. So Job Stewart punched out a minute 25.4 on the previous lap to actually extend a bit of a margin over Suzlin Harlow. Last time around he was a bit slower at a minute 25.9, but still managing his pace very nicely at the front of the field. Heimgarten, Paul O'Gallen, Boyd are all in the 26s at the moment. Edwards, Suzlin Harlow, Craig in the high 25s. Reece Cohen a bit slower that time around, a minute 27.1. Fastest driver on the circuit at the moment, Shane Van Gisbergen, down in 14th position. He'll obviously be pretty filthy with himself after that mistake that he made early on in the race after the safety car restart, and he'll be on the attack and looking to make up some places.
He certainly will be, and we've seen so many times Van Gisbergen putting on a massive charge, hunting down drivers, and trying to gain a few spots right towards the end of the race. But Fraser Ross right now on the screen, and one of the many McLarens in this race. It's good to see the McLarens having a bit more of a representation in this season. Of course, last season they did have Shane Van Gisbergen briefly running them, but of course in the end, Shane would chop and change cars a little bit, which should give him a penalty every now and then. But right now, Fraser Ross in the McLaren doing a great job. And I know the Altus drivers of Zach Hanlon and Simon Feigl in the McLaren as well. And that's the reason we love it as a broadcaster. Next time you get off throttle is heading into the hairpin now. 3, 2, 1. How good is that? You love a car that gives you a little bit of fireworks.
But Fraser Ross, of course, very familiar to the McLaren machinery. The MP412C is a car that he raced previously in the Australian GT Championship. Of course, in more recent times, we've seen him in the newer model McLaren 650S GT3. But Fraser Ross, an accomplished driver who has had a lot of success in the Australian GT Championship in real life, and he's classified as one of our professional drivers for this afternoon's race.
Like you said, a lot of experience there for Fraser Ross, who's doing a good job at the moment. Obviously, wasn't the luckiest earlier in the race, and now does find himself a lap down, but still, nonetheless, is doing a great job to try and get whatever kind of points he can get from round number 1. and use that as momentum moving forward to round number 2, of course.
Cool story, Bo, about Fraser Ross. So his dad, Ian Ross, owns an advertising agency, which is the Ross Partnership. Guess who one of their major clients is?
Who would that be?
McLaren Australia.
Well, there you go.
So they handle all of the marketing and advertising for the McLaren Australia distributorship. So as you can imagine, they're pretty cool cars to be managing advertising campaigns for.
No, absolutely. Of course, McLaren's such a synonymous brand when it comes to motorsport, and even in Australia, they're really beginning to make a name now with, of course, Fraser Ross's presence in the Australian GT series. So awesome that Fraser does have that partnership there, and obviously the connection there to McLaren is a very significant one indeed. We're having a look at Job Stewart on screen at the moment, who is doing a very good job. In fact, fastest car on track last lap around, which is unreal considering that he, of course, is on old tyres compared to a lot of the other cars on track. Only the the 3 cars behind him, and Andre Heimgartner, Lewis Paul Gallen, and Jack Boyd are on the same strategy as him. Jackson Susan Harlow, with missed it just about on new tyres, has actually found a way past Craig Edwards on old tyres. So Craig is clearly losing a little bit of time, and we have actually just noticed he did a 1:31.5 last lap around, which is significantly off the pace. So what I might do is try and find where exactly Craig Edwards has had an issue, and in fact it's very early on in the lap. There was a lapped car who had spun very early in the lap. It was the drivers of Ryan Healy and Daniel Benefield getting involved in a crash. You can see it in front on screen there, and sadly Craig Edwards had nowhere to go and had to take avoiding action.
So that was why Craig Edwards' lap was a bit slower, and you can see there that Jackson Susan Harlow was just able to shoot straight through on the inside of Craig Edwards because he was off the road. So that's pretty much a bonus spot game there for Jackson Susan Harlow, who's now up into position number 5. Next car on his hit list will be 4th place Jack Boyd.
Yeah, so Jack Boyd is next on the hit list, and the gap is not very large at all. The gap, in fact, only about 4 seconds between the two. So Jack Boyd can't be feeling all too comfortable with Jackson Susan Harlow hunting him down at the moment. In fact, there's a bit of issues for Jack Boyd at the moment. There's a few cars in front of him having a great scrap, and that will be slowing Jack Boyd down a little bit, especially in this slow section of the track. You've got Zach Hanlon, Steve Johnson, and Tom Katsadonis right in front. So right now for Jack, he's going to have to try and find a way past. Zach Hanlon looks to move to the outside, and that should be an easy pass for Jack Boyd. And it does give him a little bit more breathing room. So that's good news for Jack, and not good news for Jackson Susan Harlow, whose Ultra Esports teammate makes life a little too easy for Jack Boyd there.
I noticed as well that Job Stewart was closing in on quite a big bunch of lapped cars that were all having their own battles. So our race leader is shortly going to be encountering some pretty heavy-duty laps traffic as well. And here he is on screen at the moment, Job Stewart, right up behind the lapped car. Always a bit of a tricky situation. How much of a risk do you take in overtaking the laps traffic? Because you don't want to lose too much time getting stuck behind back markers, but at the same time, you don't want to take an unnecessary risk, have contact, have them not see you in time, and have damage to your car. Particularly embarrassing if you are leading the race at the time when that happens. So it's a bit of a risk versus reward situation when it comes to managing the laps traffic.
Absolutely. If you're very, very aggressive in traffic, some situations you might even gain a second a lap when you do get to pass the lapped car very aggressively early in the lap, and then don't have to sit behind it for the second part of the lap. So if you are aggressive in traffic, you can find fairly significant gains a lot of the time, but like you say, it takes one moment to go wrong when passing a lapped car, and all of a sudden you've lost 10, 12 plus seconds recovering your car from the grass, or perhaps even getting damage and costing yourself time per lap for the rest of the race. So it is a risk management thing, and many of these drivers are using their heads and playing it very, very smart, not being too aggressive, and respecting that not only are they trying not to lose time, but the lapped cars are trying not to lose time as well. They're all working together and making things very easy on one another, which is great to see. But there's always going to be that one driver who thinks they can gain a little bit more in traffic, and we'll see which of these drivers perhaps goes a bit more aggressive than some others as we look on board with Andre Heimgartner,
who is still sitting in position 2 at the moment and maintaining the margin back to Louis Paul O'Gallen at about 2 seconds. But he has lost a bit of time to Job Stewart. It's now almost 13 seconds the margin between first and second. We've got 39 minutes remaining in the motor race. And right now, Bo, it just has that feel about it that it's building up to something. Everybody's been a little bit too well behaved for a little bit too long as far as I'm concerned. And we know that these GT3 races have a history of throwing up a bit of late race drama, which has often produced an exciting finish for us. So it might be relatively calm and sedate at the moment, but I reckon it's building up to a climax.
It absolutely could be, so I can't wait to see what exactly happens in the next phase of this race, because like you say, it is being a little bit too calm at the moment. I'm not seeing anything, you know, any kind of dramas going on. Everyone's being way careful in traffic. Everyone's giving racing room, which is very unlike some of these GT3 drivers. Sometimes they love to get the elbows out and fight very aggressively. So 38 minutes to go. Let's see if anyone's willing to be a bit more risky and perhaps overstep the mark. And maybe we get a safety car, maybe we get a little bit of drama, something to spice the race up. Because right now, everyone's being way too nice to each other. As we look at the 77 car, who slides very wide in the infield section of the circuit. And Andre Heimgartner does get that laps move done nice and easily.
So Heimgartner picks his way through on the car of Zach Nickel. There's Chris Owen back there as well. So Chris Owen, of course, was up inside the top 10 earlier, but got involved in some incidents earlier on in the race. It's too early for me to say, Bo, that I think the driving standards today have been the best that we've seen so far in the GT3 Eseries. Is that tempting fate by making that sort of comment?
I would not be making that sort of comment until we see the checkered flag.
You have to say, though, that, yeah, there have been a few incidents, but certainly nowhere near as many as we've seen at some of the previous events.
I think these drivers realise what's at stake here. It's a very high-level series now. It's gone up in the ranks. And, you know, everyone wants to put on a good show. They want to make sure that they're representing their own sponsors well. Because, of course, let's not forget, a lot of these drivers have their own backing on the car, and they don't want to be making a fool of themselves either. So they're being a lot more careful this season. And I think that's a great thing to see, because we are seeing some brilliant racing as a result of that. And that first lap was beautiful to see. 50 GT3 cars funnel their way through the infield section of Indianapolis for the first lap, and everybody escaped scot-free.
A fairly quiet afternoon for our networkcafe.com.au safety car driver so far. I wonder if we've seen another appearance from that car. As I say that, we see in the background there, I think that was Dole's Ellery, wasn't it? It was one of the roofs, and it was a black car getting turned around. Yes, it was. So Dole's Ellery, oh, and he's got damage as well, and he actually spins that car as he tries to get it back onto the racetrack. I think we'll take the rallycross route that we saw being taken a bit earlier on. So Dole's Ellery there just getting nerfed into a spin.
We get a motor simulation replay up on screen. Dalton Ellery there. Plenty of cars in front having their own little battle of Mercedes with a big block there. And I think it's going to be the BMW who will make contact, only light contact, and then goes for a bit of secondary as well. And if that's what's caused the damage to Dalton Ellery's car, I would be very, very surprised. That was a little touch, and sadly for Dalton, that's had very big implications on his car, which is a massive shame to see, because he was doing a very good job indeed. You can see there, he's not the happiest guy in the world, and look at the steering angle required to keep that car on track right now.
So, unsurprisingly, Dalton Ellery back in the pits for some attention to that car, and he was already running just outside the top 40 anyway, and he will drop a couple more positions. Here's Shane Van Gisbergen. Not been a bad recovery drive from SVG so far. He's back up inside the top 10, back up to 9th position after the problems that we saw for him earlier on. And we know that he does have pretty good tyres compared to those cars that he's battling against. He's just worked his way around Jeremy Clark, who, like I mentioned, we believe to be a bit out of sequence and probably requiring another pit stop to get to the finish of this race, given that he's now been out on the circuit for 30 laps in total. He stops very early on before we actually had the first safety car intervention. So even though he would have topped the car up with fuel at that stage, that still not going to be enough to get him through to the end of the race. So he expects Jeremy Clark to be in the pits sometime in the near future. Jackson Suzlin Harlow, currently the highest placed of the cars that took tyres at the pit stop. Job Stewart, currently the highest placed car overall. and is continuing to drive away from the rest of the field. His lead now out to 14 seconds over Andre Heimgartner. Louis Paul O'Gallen sitting in position 3. Then it's Jack Boyd in 4th. Jackson Suzlin-Harlow 5th. Back to our pole seat of Craig Edwards in position 6. Jamie Crane 7th. Reese Cohen in 8th. Shane Van Gisbergen in 9th position. And Jeremy Clark completing your top 10 at this stage.
Last time we checked in on Jackson Suzlin-Harlow and the gap from himself all the way up to Job Stewart, the gap was 27 seconds, but such is the effort that Job Stewart's putting in at the moment. He's actually managed to find a way to extend the gap to Jackson Suzlin-Harlow. So Job Stewart, who is on old tyres at the moment, has pulled out 1.4 seconds since the last time we checked in on a driver on older tyres, but that means nothing. The safety car will be deployed and the race turns on its head.
Well, we knew that there was going to be a twist in the tail at some point, and out comes the networkcafe.com.au safety car for its second appearance of the motor race with 33 minutes remaining on the clock. So Job Stewart, who had built a 14-second lead over Andre Heimgartner, is going to see that lead diminished to virtually nothing. And now, it doesn't really become a case of strategy or anything like that. It's going to be a pure sprint race over about half an hour through to the end of this motor race. Interesting thing for me here, Bo, was will people come in, particularly if they're a bit further down the order, and take a fresh set of tyres under this safety car? Again, I don't think any of our front runners will dive into the pits at this stage, but if you're a bit further back in the field, might be worth bolting on some fresh rubber and trying to make a late charge.
I agree to that to a point, but the thing is, if you look at Jackson Suzlin-Harlow, who has taken tyres in that first part in the race, the advantage he has had over the likes of Job Stewart, who did not change tyres, has been absolutely minimal. He hasn't been able to make inroads, and yes, Job Stewart's very fast, and yes, Jackson's been able to catch and pass Craig Edwards and was closing quickly on a Jack Boyd, but as a whole, the advantage of taking tyres is nowhere near as large as I actually thought it would be. I thought the gap closing rate would be a lot faster, but no, Jackson was not able to make it happen, and we know how close him and Job Stewart are on pace, so you would expect tyres to be the deciding factor there, but that just did not happen. So I can see a lot of drivers, even the mid-pack, deciding to gamble, not take tyres, even if they're perhaps in the midfield to even the back of the field, not taking tyres to try and gain track position under safety car, rather than trying to gain it on track with new tyres.
The other thing as well, of course, is that with this safety car coming out and the fact that the drivers will be able to save fuel coasting around at low speed behind the safety car, any of the drivers who are maybe a bit marginal on the fuel should probably be okay from this point. So we believe that everybody will have sufficient fuel to get them through to the end of the race from this point.
I would absolutely agree with that. I can't see any drivers unless they did pit a very, very long time ago. Jeremy Clark last pitted 32 laps ago. Dean J 30 laps ago. John Pruden also pitted quite a fair way away. The rest of the drivers are relatively on the same strategy. But yeah, there are a couple of drivers who are definite outliers who will struggle. But for your likes of the leaders, they're all just about on their 19th or 20th lap of the stint. We're looking at another 22 laps in this race just about. So plenty of drivers, I think, will be staying out and electing not to do anything. But right now, you can't do anything, even if you wanted to. The pit entry is still closed, and drivers will have to wait another lap before they can decide their fate on whether they pit or not. As I believe we've got Benjamin D'Alia getting a wave around, so wave arounds will be taking effect under this safety car, which is good news. What's bad news, if your name is Job Stewart, though, that means less cars between you and Jackson Suzlin-Harlow.
That is correct, and sometimes those lapped cars can be quite an important buffer for somebody who's leading the race on worn tyres. But like you say, the wave around rules are in effect for iRacing, so if you are a lap down, then you do get waves past the safety car, so you get the opportunity to go round, get onto the back of the queue behind the safety car and effectively get your lap back. Now, talking about people who might potentially be pit visitors under this safety car, I reckon that Jeremy Clark in position number 10 would be a primary candidate, given that he's now 33 and a half laps into his stint. So he will be one of the drivers who will now be on a 2-stop strategy, having stopped earlier in the race, and perhaps some drivers a bit further down the order might come in as well. But again, like you said, the gain for the new tyres hasn't really seemed to have been there based on the lap times from Jackson, Suzel and Harlow so far.
I've just been having a little chat off screen there with the race director, Sam Blacklock, at the moment. I can confirm this safety car is actually a competition caution. So we're going to bunch the field up and we're going to go racing at the end of this safety car period as a competition caution. So another curveball there, and I'm sure Job Stewart did not want to see this at all, Lockie.
No, but that's obviously one of the rules of the Speed Cafe GT3 Eseries, is that the race director does have the discretion to deploy a competition caution if and when he sees fit, and that's exactly what's happened. And from an entertainment perspective, bring it on, I say. That gives us an exciting flat-out sprint to the finish.
I agree 100%. What we might do, though, is go to an ad break and check out some of our brilliant sponsors who sponsor the Speed Cafe GT3 E-Series.
Speedcafe.com, your #1 source for all the latest motorsport news and features. Breaking news, live event updates, unprecedented global motorsport coverage, performance motoring news and reviews, all in the palm of your hand, anywhere, anytime. Speedcafe.com, first, fast and free.
You're watching round number 1 of the Speedcafe.com GT3 E-Series. It's coming to you live right around the world on Speedcafe.com from Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the road course at the famed Indianapolis circuit. We've got just over 26 minutes remaining. We're currently under the control of the networkcafe.com.au safety car, but not too far away from getting a race restart. And it's Job Stewart who's been in control of this race from the outset, who has command at the front of the field, but what was a 14-second lead before the safety car has evaporated, and he's now got an angry pack of pursuers, including Andre Heimgartner, Lewis, Paul O'Gallen, Jack Boyd, and the danger man, Jackson Suzel and Harlow, who has the tyres in the best condition of any of the runners in the top 5. My name's Lachlan Mansell. I'm joined in commentary by Bo Albert. And Bo, we knew that things had settled down, and we suggested that it looks like it was maybe building up towards a climax. Now we've compressed the field with the safety car. And what's the old cliche? Safety cars breed safety cars. So let's see what happens as we get into the closing stanza of this race.
Absolutely. We said it was all building up to something, and this is exactly what it built up to. The pit entry has been declared open, and some drivers may decide that now is the time to dive on in and deploy their effectively final strategy call. But so far, look at the leaders. They want nothing to do with the pit entry. They are fine with the strategies they have chosen. Of course, like you said, Jackson Susan Harlow on the freshest tyres of anybody in this field. His tyres are 22 laps fresher than Jack Boyd, Luis Paulo Gallen, Andre Heimgartner, and race leader Job Stewart. But what we saw in those opening laps after the tyre change for Jackson Susan Harlow is the pace advantage wasn't that significant compared to those in front who decided to double stint their tyres. So we've got a couple of questions to be answered. Of course, Job Stewart, plenty of pace in that BMW, but is this a little extra motivation for Jackson Susan Harlow? And now getting the slipstream from the cars in front as well, because it's so much closer now, is that going to allow him to challenge the likes of Job Stewart?
So a few pit visitors, as we suspected, mainly cars that were a bit further back in the order. And Jeremy Clark, who we knew was running on a different strategy to pretty much everybody else in the field, he had to pit because he wouldn't have had enough fuel on board to get to the finish of the race. So a pit stop out of necessity for Jeremy Clark. The good news for him is that he will get to bolt on some fresh tyres, and he will therefore have a pretty fast race car in the back end of this race. The bad news, of course, is that he's lost a lot of track position in having to take this late pit stop, and he's plummeted all the way back to position number 34. Lots of cars still on the late lap. That's the other point that we should make here. There are still 36 cars, if you don't mind, Bo, on the late lap of this race. So still a lot of cars that, thanks to the safety car and where it's fallen, are well and truly in contention in this race.
Which is fantastic. The more cars in with a shot at this race win or fighting for a very high up position is good news in my books. Of course, a lot of drivers did get waiver rounds, which does allow them to get a lap back if they were a lap down, in between the safety car or in between drivers who were right up the order and the race leaders. So safety car will dive in at the end of this lap. The networkcafe.com.au Porsche Cayman GT4 car, which is a new addition to iRacing, will dive into the pit lane and leave control in the hands of Job Stewart. Safety car given the order to pull away, and 80 kilometers an hour will be the speed Job Stewart will maintain in his attempt to try and to get an advantage over Andre Heimgartner behind. That Mercedes has plenty of punch in initial grunt, so can he get a good restart and stay with Job Stewart and put him under a little bit of pressure? Because the fact is, Job has hardly had any pressure in this race. He's been all by himself for a long period now, so having a little bit of pressure behind him is going to be a major mindset reset for him. So he's going to have to deal with that very, very quickly, because Andre Heimgartner will take no prisoners on this safety car restart. You said that safety cars breed safety cars. Let's see if it stays clean or if we'll get a little bit more carnage. It's a great restart from the Job Stewart in the Pursuit Sim Racing BMW, ducking left and right, trying to break the toe immediately. You can see Jackson Susan Harlow right against the pit. Oh, it's wide in the background. Shane Van Gisbergen bump drafting Jackson Susan Harlow into turn one. Very, very aggressive stuff. Do they all make it through the opening lap restart? We will find out very shortly, Lockie.
Gee, there was some aggressive stuff there. Oh, Shane Van Gisbergen cops a hit from behind from one of the other BMWs, I think that was, and that's forced Van Gisbergen wide and will potentially cost him a couple of positions with a bit of a loss of momentum, but he's gathered it up again, Shane Van Gisbergen, and he's now attacking down the inside of Jamie Craig in the Lego car. They'll go side by side, and SVG will grab the spot, so that is one spot gained for the Gears since this safety car restart. Jamie Craig now fending off Robert Drysdale, who's also in one of those roof entries, and Jackson Susan Harlow waving to the inside of Reese Cohen as well, as Cohen looks to go round the outside of Susan Harlow, but Harlow with the fresher tyres should be able to hang on, or should he? No, he'll actually concede that position. So that's not worked out whatsoever for Jackson Susan Harlow. He needed to be gaining spots after the safety car restart. He's actually going backwards.
Not ideal at all, but a great move from Reese Cohen. Motion simulation replay up on the screen. I think we're going to take a look at what's happened on the run into turn one. We're looking at Macaulay Jones on screen. The Cool Drive AMG late on the brakes. He will go. That's very late indeed. And he gets the position done just about. The 26 car goes side by side and turned around into turn number two. And that's a sad moment for Macaulay Jones, watching the field stream by. Well, he is stuck in the gravel trap as Reese Cohen, who made that spot on Jackson Susan Harlow, is actually hit by Craig Edwards. The two go around. Well, the driver of Reese Cohen goes around and will lose a whole manner of spots that he worked so hard to gain.
So Shane Van Gisbergen and Craig Edwards battling over position. We saw that they came together earlier in the race. Jamie Craig involved in that contest as well, as is Robert Drysdale. Paul Auditore just behind this battle group as well. He's got watching grief at the moment, watching all of the action unfold in front of him at the front of the field. Job Stewart's already opened up a 1 second lead over Andre Heimgartner since this safety car restart.
Very, very good restart indeed from Job Stewart, doing exactly what he needs to do, which is pull away and go fast, and he's nailing at the moment. A great effort there. He'll continue to try and extend that margin as Andre Heimgartner trying to break the slipstream of Luis Paulo Gallen, who has bigger issues right in his mirror. Jack Boyd with a great run on the Ferrari 488 as they head onto the Indianapolis Motor Speedway banking. Going the wrong direction to the Indy 500, but Jack Boyd doesn't care because he's got the draft, he's got the run, he's got Luis Paulo Gallen going very defensive, and they'll go side by side. It's going to be a long way around the outside if Boyd's going to make this happen. Who's going to play later on the brakes? The answer is that did equal, and Jack Boyd sadly can't turn it in earlier enough on the dirty side of the track, and Luis will hold on for now.
So it was BMWs that reigned supreme in qualifying, but over the course of the race, the balance of performance formula has worked to perfection to the point where we've now got 4 different brands of race cars inside the top 4 positions. It's BMW leading Mercedes, leading Ferrari, leading a pair of Audis at this stage, and Jack Boyd with that failed overtaking manoeuvre now falls back into the clutches of a fired up Jackson Suzel and Harlow in Porsche Esports Audi R8, who's on the attack.
We saw Craig Edwards make contact with Reece Cohen. He's going to be getting a drive-through penalty. So for our pole sitter, it's been a race to forget. Absolutely. He'll be taking a trip through the pit lane very shortly indeed. Jack Boyd, though, like you say, under all kinds of pressure at the moment as Jackson Susan Harlow working left, right and centre to try and make something happen on his fellow Audi. He has to be careful though, because there's a very feisty Kiwi who is definitely an up-and-coming driver, so to say. I'm just kidding, it's Shane Van Gisbergen right in the mirror of Jackson Susan Harlow. We'll see how these two fire their way onto the oval. Very close indeed, all 3 of them bumper to bumper. Susan Harlow making a move on Jack Boyd. Van Gisbergen's going to try and maybe get both, but there's not really a gap. He's going to force a gap. They're going to go 3 wide. Who's going to be playing latest on the brakes? Jack Boyd bails out. Susan Harlow puts up the fight. He gets the spot. And Jack Boyd is ruining his early attempt at a braking maneuver into turn 1 because he's lost 2 spots in a single move.
For a fraction of a second there, it looks like that Shane Van Gisbergen was going to go straight through the middle and round up both of those cars in one fell swoop, but Jackson Susan and Harlow really gained a spot, but now he's in danger of losing a spot because he's got the gears. Shane Van Gisbergen right on his tail, and we know just how much SVG thrives in these sorts of situations. This is what it looks like on board Shane Van Gisbergen. Wow, there was only just a BMW Z4's width there in the middle of the 2 Audi R8s, but Shane Van Gisbergen somehow managed to make it fit. He was able to gain 1 spot there on Jack Boyd.
That was a fantastic move there from Shane Van Gisbergen. He was fighting so hard for that. He had a look with a long left hand at the start of the lap. Didn't make it happen, got the cut back, and made it happen around the outside into the Grand Prix hairpin section. So for Shane Van Gisbergen, a brilliant move. He worked hard for that and will get that spot of Jackson Susan Harlow, who goes down another spot. So Jackson gained it all at turn 1. Van Gisbergen gains it all back before the lap is done, but now a major slipstream from Jackson Susan Harlow. Does he decide to come back at Shane Van Gisbergen? He thinks about it. Jack Boyd also getting very aggressive as well as Jack Boyd tries to fight with the Altus Esports driver. At the end of it all, they all stay in the same order as they started, but it's getting very racy at the moment for 4th spot at the moment. It's allowing the guys in front to really skip away. Luis Paulo Gallen all over the back of Andre Heimgartner, but Mokum Simulation replay up on screen, around the outside, gets the inside to the next corner. That is as textbook as they come.
That's an SVJ style move, isn't it? Whenever you want to see breathtaking overtaking manoeuvres, you can rely on Shane Van Gisbergen to deliver, and he's now the highest placed car in the motor race that took a set of tyres at his pit stop. So Shane Van Gisbergen up to 4th position. He'll now be chasing down the Ferrari of Luis Paulo Gallen and the Mercedes of Andre Heimgartner. If he can clear those 2 cars in quick order, then he just might be able to have a crack at Job Stewart for the race win.
Well, Luis Paulo Gallen definitely has plenty of pace. So does Shane Van Gisbergen. We'll see which of these drivers can maybe take it to Job Stewart for the win. The issue is that Andre Heimgartner, who's doing a great job at the moment in 2nd place, just cannot match, and that gap has gone out to 2.4 seconds to your race leader. And Luis Paulo Gallen, you can see there in the draft, closing up a little bit. That Ferrari, plenty of top-line speed. It's the acceleration where it suffers a bit, but at the end of it all, at the end of the straight, it's got plenty, and Andre Heimgartner overshooting turn 1 ever so slightly is all the incentive Luis Paulo Gallen needs to close up even more. But the issue is Shane Van Gisbergen is right there as well. Last time we saw Shane Van Gisbergen third in a train of 3, well, he made both spots in a single lap. What can he do this time? Looks up the inside of LPG. Nothing forthcoming. So SVG and LPG need to try and work together to make something happen, but he's not working together with anyone because he's turning the Ferrari around into a spin, and LPG is going to be left facing the wrong direction, and he will not be a happy camper about that at all.
He won't be a happy camper, and I don't know that the officials are going to be particularly thrilled about that one either, because it was a late lunge there from Shane Van Gisbergen. He pulled out at the last minute, and I don't think he was quite far enough up the inside. Here's what it looks like on board with Lewis Paul O'Gowan. You'll see the BMW was right on his tail, pulled out to the right, bang, and around goes the Ferrari. Now, interesting to see that from a front-on angle as well. I'd like to see just how far up the inside Shane Van Gisbergen got, but the initial camera view that we got of that incident looks pretty damning as far as SVG was concerned. Here's another look at it. So, it was quite a late move. So, he was on the right-hand side of Lewis Paul O'Gowan. So, as they exited the left-hander, SVG went to the right. Bang. Now, I reckon it was the right rear wheel where the contact was made, so you would have to say that Van Gisbergen nowhere near far enough up the inside based on that camera view.
We'll have another look on board. You can see a very late lunge, and yeah, right rear wheel is where the contact was made. The stewards will be making a call on that very soon, I'm sure. They're very efficient in how they work, but right now, Shane all over the back of Andre Heimgartner. Penalty or no penalty, or impending, we don't quite know right now, but he is putting on a great show and is all over the back of the AMG. We'll see what happens here, as there's plenty of straight line speed in the BMW. So what Shane's going to be trying to do here, I think, is making sure he maximizes his run. So he's going to obviously take the usual line through here. That's all about standard, but watch how far to the left he'll try and get here and really just build this run. Cuts early and gets on the power as best he can. I think that actually the better exit there actually went to Andre Heimgartner, but this BMW has plenty of punch and a straight line speed in this current balance of performance that has been applied to this series through the right-hander of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, closing and closing. You can see that Andre Heimgartner is not even defending all too hard because he needs to defend fairly certain, but he's got a slipstream from Fraser Ross in the McLaren, which could play a bit of a decisive factor, but doesn't matter because SVG dives up the inside. Contact with Heimgartner forces him a little wide, almost into the driver of Jackson Susan Harlow. No contact between those two, but Shane Van Gisbergen makes another spot up to position number 2. That's a great move. Can he hunt down the race leader? 2.6 seconds. Will he get a penalty? Well, we've got to find out soon. There's 8.5 laps to go in this race.
Another race where there's some controversy, isn't there? So Shane Van Gisbergen, pretty much for the second week in a row, we've got a situation where one of our race contenders is going to be the subject of an investigation, but let's just appreciate this battle at the moment between Andre Heimgartner in the Mercedes and Jackson Suzlin Harlow in the Audi R8. Suzlin Harlow, with good tyres at his disposal, able to carry plenty of corner speed in the Audi, and Andre Heimgartner's got his mirrors full of the blue and yellow and orange Altus Esports Audi R8.
He definitely does, and you can see that there's a very aggressive line taken from JSH, and I think that line where he was bouncing the car through the grass just a little bit has hurt him way too much to make any kind of move. We'll see if I eat my words at the end of this long straight, but I think that Audi a little too far back to make anything happen in the next 500 meters of the track. You can see there, coming off the oval, you get a good idea of just how banked it actually is there as the drive-through penalty goes out to the 77 of Zach Nickel for turn 6 car contact. So Zach Nickel clearly getting himself into a little bit of strife, but look at Andre Heimgartner using all of that inside curb as we also look back at the battle, which includes, Jackson with a slowdown penalty. I thought it was going to be Andre who cut a little bit too much of that corner perhaps, but something's happened to Jackson. I'm actually trying to see where he's actually cut the corner. I'm not seeing anything particularly obvious, in all honesty. We'll have a look on board with a motor simulation replay right about now, but I could not particularly see anything unjust there from Jackson Susan Harlow.
We'll have a look at a super slow-mo replay as they headed down into turn number 1. And Heimgartner was across the curb. Susan Harlow was maybe just a fraction more across the curb than Heimgartner. Very, very late in the corner. Jay, that's a tough call, but the slowdown penalty, officials do not discriminate, and it's a decision that's made by technology, so there's no arguing with it. If it gets imposed, you just have to cop it sweet. And for Jackson Suzel and Harlow, the bad news for him is that it's cost him 2 positions, with both Jack Boyd and Jamie Craig able to get through.
Absolutely, and those two are having a great battle. Jack Boyd is under all kinds of defensive maneuvers right now because Jamie Craig is looking very quick in that RUF, which the Lego sponsorship looks very, very nice, which we touched on earlier in the race. But Jamie Craig not able to make anything happen with the Audi into turn 1 on this particular lap. The good news for him, still 8.5 minutes in this race. He's got a bit more time on his side to play with, but the clock is definitely ticking, so he has to get a move on sometime soon.
So Job Stewart continues to lead by 2.3 seconds over Shane Van Gisbergen. SVG was a couple of tenths of a second quicker than Job Stewart last time around, but Stewart's still doing a terrific job of maintaining the lap times that he needs to do to keep Van Gisbergen at bay. Andre Heimgartner a bit slower at the moment, but at least that pressure that he was under from Jackson Suzel and Harlow has been relieved for the time being.
It definitely has been, but we'll see how this little battle does emerge as we have a look at Robert Crusdale. He's had a bit of a lonely race in all honesty, but he's done very well just floating around the top 10 all race. I don't think I've actually seen any point in the race where Robert Crusdale has been outside of the top 10. So a very quiet race from Rob, but doing very well indeed in that rough car, and with the JP Simshed sponsorship on there as well. But take a look at the likes of Jamie Craig and Jack Boyd. That's the closest that he has been in a long time to make a move stick. We'll see what Jamie can do as the Audi just trying to duck and weave the slipstream away. And even in the drafts, that rough does not quite have the legs to compete with the Audi. So the Audi with some very good straight line speed in regards to the roughs. And that is very bad news for Jamie Craig, because there is another Audi closing very quickly behind.
It's been the story of Jamie Craig's afternoon, hasn't it? He spent pretty much the whole race stuck behind cars that have got a bit more straight line performance, but maybe aren't quite as quick through the corners. So that's always one of the frustrations as a racing driver, getting stuck behind cars that hold you up through the corners and then being unable to get past them because they've got strengths in places where you can actually overtake. Still, Jamie looking quite cool, calm and composed there from our webcam view. If he is frustrated, he's not really showing it behind the wheel there at the moment.
No, he's not. He's doing a very nice job, and like you say, very cool, calm and composed as Jack Boyd gets a little bit of a wriggle there and moves around quite a lot. Jack Boyd well in the slipstream now, though, of Andre Heimgartner, as actually the 22 car gets disqualified from this race for multiple incidents. So we'll try and have a look at who the 22 car is. That will go to Oscar Target. So Oscar Target, sadly, we're talking about what a great job he was doing all race long. Sadly, the stewards think he's caused one too many issues tonight, and that will be removed from this race.
It's unfortunate for one of the young drivers in the field, so night done for Oscar Target. Still, so there we go. There's the webcam view of Oscar Target's sim set up, and he has departed the seat. So game over for him, unfortunately. On a slowdown for Jamie Craig. So another driver's have fallen victim to just taking a bit too much of that inside ripple strip there at turn number 1. And he's going to fall back to 6th position behind Jackson Suzel and Harlow. But it's also the time that he's lost. He's fallen back by about 2 seconds as a result of that mistake.
Absolutely. If he wasn't frustrated before, I imagine he might just about be frustrated now. It's a disaster for Jamie Craig, and the person that benefits from that is Jackson Suzel and Harlow, who knows all about slowdown penalties at that particular corner. Post-race pit lane penalty, car 97, Shane Van Gisbergen.
Post-race. Yeah, interesting that they've decided that that's going to be a post-race penalty rather than handing it down during race conditions. But anyway, we'll let the officials make those decisions as they see fit. The margin from first to second, it's 1.4 seconds at the moment. So again, Job Stewart, even despite the fact that he's on older tyres, doing a really good job of managing the margin back to SVG. But even if SVG was to catch up to Job Stewart, you'd just about be better off letting him go rather than risk contact, because Oh, so here we go. Jackson Suzel and Harlow up the inside of Jack Boyd. The two outies side by side through turn 2. And it is Suzel and Harlow who will grab that position. So Jackson Suzel and Harlow, it's taken him a few laps, but he's managed to get back both of the positions that he lost during that slowdown penalty. And he'll be able to have another crack at Andre Heimgartner very shortly. But the point that I was making is that, yeah, Job Stewart, if SVG was to catch him, you might as well let him go past because he's going to win the race anyway based on that post-race penalty that's coming the way of SVG.
Absolutely. So there's plenty in the favour right now. As I'm actually just seeing Simon Feigl, he's going to hate me, my team manager, for mentioning he's off the road once again, but contact with one of the BMWs. I think it might have been driver of Dale Breed, has unfortunately tagged the Altus Esports team manager into a major spin, which is a shame because Simon was making some very good progress in that McLaren, up to 13th place at one point, and sadly it was all a little bit too much in the end. The BMW tags it, and Simon could do nothing to catch that car.
Dale Breed, there's a name from Australian motorsport history, former competitor in the Supercars Championship back in the mid-2000s. As, here we go, so the drive-through penalty has been imposed during race conditions. Shane van Gisbergen is taking a tour through pit lane, and that is going to take him out of contention as here is the move for second position. Jackson Suzel and Harlow slices his way down the inside of Andre Heimgartner, and it's now Jackson Suzel and Harlow back up into second position, but he is a whopping 7.5 seconds behind Job Stewart with less than 3 minutes remaining.
Second place is definitely as high as it gets at the moment for Jackson Suzel and Harlow, but look how far back he must have made this move. He ducks to the outside now, and then with a very late switch back to the inside. That was super aggressive from Jackson Suzel and Harlow. I'd love to see that at full time, full speed from another camera angle as well, because that is a brilliant dive at the very last moment and makes the move stick. And Andre Heimgartner really just given no option there.
No, by the time Andre Heimgartner started to move across to try and defend the position, Jackson Suzel and Harlow was already up the inside there. So great move from Suzel and Harlow, whose newer tyres are now starting to work to his advantage as the older tyres on all of the other cars start to fall off the cliff. And unfortunately, with the margin that Job Stewart has got at the front of this motor race, it's going to be a bit too little too late for Jackson Suzel and Harlow. Still, podium finish is a good result, and with the way that the point system is structured for Speed Cafe GT3 Eseries, it's all about accumulating consistent points throughout the 6 weeks of the championship, and second place will be a very, very solid and healthy and valuable bundle of points for Jackson Suzel and Harlow.
It will be for Jackson Suzel and Harlow, but the thing is with Jackson is he's a very competitive driver, and second place, it might be good points, but I can tell you right now, he is not going to be happy in the slightest in that, and it will require a little bit of a talking to actually try and get him to accept that second place is a very good result. But we're just looking at Luis Paul O'Gallen, and you just saw a shot very briefly on who was literally 2 cars back. That would be Shane van Gisbergen, the driver that turned him into a spin just a few laps ago.
Well, Luis Paul O'Gallen's potentially going to get the last laugh there because he is ahead of SVG at this stage, as we see. Unfortunately, again, your Altus Esports team boss Simon Feigl off for another spin. So he was running inside the top 20 a couple of laps ago, but these couple of spins and excursions have now dropped him all the way back to 32nd position. As we see a replay here of Simon Feigl, and this time it's contact with the Mercedes. So a couple of separate incidents there. It was Jada Ransley, in fact, the car that he had contact with.
I've just been watching Simon Feigl, and he's now turned a BMW around as well, and that was Stephen Ellery that Feigl has sadly got the bumper out and turned around. He's actually going to redress that spot though, so Simon doing the smart thing to do, and he's going to redress that one himself rather than letting the stewards get involved. If you look at Jack Boyd on screen at the moment, and he's putting on a lot of pressure against Andre Heimgartner. And I'm on my timing screens at least. We obviously got it wrong last week. I'm being shown the final lap of the race. If it is the final lap of the race, well, Jack Boyd's got to do something very soon because Heimgartner getting very defensive, getting very aggressive. And where can he make a move stick? He goes for a very aggressive line. Build the speed through this right-hander. Heimgartner went defensive and is going to compromise his exit. But that Mercedes has so much punch out of the corner. And the Audi is going to have to run somewhere aggressively to make this move happen, because Heimgartner putting the car in all the right places as Job Stewart makes his way onto the oval for the final time, Lockie.
What an exquisite performance it's been from one of the young rising stars of the Australian sim racing scene. Started the race inside the top 3, got to the lead early on. He has not put a wheel wrong all race long. He soaked up pressure under a couple of safety car restarts. He controlled the race all night, and it is Job Stewart who wins round number 1 of the Speed Cafe GT3 Eseries at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. A fantastic performance from Job Stewart, and a Kincrome portable toolkit is headed his way.
A fantastic prize there as we see a couple of fairly decent finishes making their way across the line as the drivers come across for their 58th and final lap at high speed. You can see a lot of drivers, they will be disappointed with their results. Luis Gallen and Shane Van Gisbergen definitely amongst them as we take a look at a motor simulation replay. This is a big battle happening on that last lap in the mid-pack. Steve Johnson, one of the cars involved, plenty of drivers swirling around. 3 wide. Nope, screw that. We'll go 4 wide contact as well. Somehow they almost held it together. Johnson hard into the wall and a big T-bone into one of the Audis as well. That was Tom Katsudonis, and sadly he copped a major hit. Chris Owen was another one of the drivers involved in that. That was super aggressive stuff on the very last lap.
Well, with points awarded all the way down to 35th position, there's always something to play for. So these were drivers battling just on the fringe of the top 20. And look at the argy-bargy. It's the World Championship battle for position 20 in the motor race. You have to feel a bit sorry there for Stephen Johnson, who got fired off into the wall. But yeah, a lot of damage happening to those cars on the very last lap of the race. But congratulations to our race winner, Job Stewart. A fantastic performance from, like I said, one of the young rising stars of the Australian sim racing scene. Performed extremely well in the Erebus Motorsport Junior Academy competition, and he is going to be your championship leader after round number 1 for the speedcafe.com GT3 E-Series. 7.2 seconds, the final winning margin back to Jackson Susel and Harlow. So amateur drivers finishing 1st and 2nd. Andre Heimgartner, the best of the pros, in 3rd spot. Ahead of Jack Boyd and Jamie Craig. They had a great battle all race long. Robert Crysdale in 6th, ahead of Matt Lupino. Mitchell McLeod, good job for him recovering from some adversity to get back up to 8th position. Paul Auditore in 9th. Dale Breen completing the top 10.
Luis Gallen would finish in 11th place at the end of it all, with Brad Klenk in 12th and Shane Van Gisbergen a penalty dropping him all the way down to 13th place. Lockie Hughes in 14th, with Jeff Cottle getting a 15th after a few off-track excursions during that race. Michael Gurry in 16th, Tyrone De Silva, Jane Ransley, Reese Cohen, and Chris Owen in your top 20.
Back to James Foster in 21st position. Stephen Johnson 22nd, despite that big crash late in the race. Dalton Ellery in 23rd, ahead of Eddie Beswick. Macaulay Jones back to Jeremy Clark. The alternate strategy didn't quite work for him tonight, back in 26th position. Jack Tafone back to Tom Katsudonis. Wayne Harrison-Watt, and then Kane Thornhill in 30th position.
31st place will go to Zach Hanlon, who had a bit of a difficult race as well in the McLaren. James Glasspool in 32nd. Stephen Ellery in 33rd, with Ben Holiday and Simon Feigl the top 35. Zach Nickel, a tough race in 36th. Daniel Yeaman in 37th. And Benjamin D'Alia will finish in 38th in our last car on the lead lap, with Ben Blaze and Fraser Ross 2 laps down in 39th and 40th respectively.
And then we start heading back to the cars that had a variety of issues throughout the race. John Martin, we know that Oscar Target was a disqualification. Daniel Benefield, Craig Edwards, Dean J, Jordan Pruden, not a great night for him. Michael Hammers, Jeff Rahali, Chris Lazarevich, and then Kyle Gretsch in 50th position, of course, was our safety car driver.
Yep, so there are our finishers for round number 1. And what a race that was. That was absolutely brilliant, Lockie. I believe we've got a couple of interviews coming up.
Yeah, first of all, we'll start off with 3rd place tonight and best of the pro drivers. Congratulations to Andre Heimgartner in the Mercedes. Good evening, Andre. Lockie Mansell here, mate. How was your race tonight?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting there. There's a few different strategies and all sorts of stuff that we could have done, but just decided to go with the one stop there. And I was a bit worried when that safety car came out late because we had to hang on a lot towards the end. But yeah, had some good battles, some good clean racing, and it was very enjoyable.
You elected not to change tyres at your pit stop. How did they hold up in those late stages?
Yeah, fairly ordinary. I didn't intend on doing the one stop, but I think the safety car sort of forced my hand in that. So I was going to take, maybe one side or something in the next pit stop. But yeah, I had to hang on, and yeah, it was definitely sliding all over the place. But luckily here, there's a big straight, and that old AMG gets up and going, so we're able to hold off people sort of more easily than I could if I was, in a car that lacked the straight line speed.
You've been doing a lot of sim racing lately, obviously in the Supercars Eseries. We've seen you in the ARG Esports Cup and now in the Speed Cafe Series as well. How much are you enjoying it?
Yeah, it's good. It's I think you'd go crazy in these times if you didn't have something like this to concentrate on. So, yeah, pretty awesome to be able to do this sort of stuff. And I never was really into it that much before, and I never really did much at all of competition stuff. So to be involved in a series like this that's run well, everyone at the front races cleanly, and just to have good racing, it makes it so much more enjoyable.
And just finally, Andre, people who you would like to thank for behind the scenes with your sim racing efforts.
Yeah, just there's a few different people. Obviously, LG have hooked me up with all these screens. Aftershock, Sim Magic, all those sort of guys, Sim Rigs, Next Level, all those guys have sort of helped out with all the simulator stuff. So, yeah, cheers.
Good stuff. Thanks, Andre. There is third place Andre Heimgartner, the best of the professional drivers for Altus Esports. Congratulations to Jackson Suzlin Harlow, and he's standing by for a chat with Bo Albert.
Jackson, that was a very tough race at the end of it all, but for yet another round in this series, you go for a slightly different tyre strategy to everyone else, and it doesn't pay out for you.
Yeah, what's it called? The last couple of rounds I haven't been taking tyres, so thought here you kind of probably have to with like the fast flowing corners and that. But I don't know. I think P2 is probably the best result anyway. The Audi wasn't as strong as the BMW tonight. Like just the straight line, we were really struggling. But yeah, is what it is. I made a couple of silly mistakes with slowdowns, which was really frustrating. But yeah, P2 isn't too bad.
We saw you go for some super aggressive moves during that race, one in particular almost 3 wide into turn 1 in the dying laps, including with Andre Heimgartner and I believe Jack Boyd as well. Talk us through some of those moves where you're really late on the brakes and risking everything.
Oh, that's what you got to do. If you like, I wasn't gonna sit there. I wanted to make as many spots as I could, so I risked everything I had, and yeah, it paid off. It was pretty fun racing with Andre, and that he was trying to hold me off, and I knew the only way I could do it, considering like I couldn't get the enough straight line to pull up beside him, so I knew I had to bomb it in, and I did that. So yeah, there wasn't any contact, so yeah, fair play.
It was a very good race indeed, Jackson. Heading into next round, what are your thoughts and also any sponsors you want to thank as well?
I don't know where the next round is yet, but we'll see. Hopefully the Audi's a bit stronger than the BMW, so I can try and get some points back. But yeah, we'll see what happens. And yeah, just massive shout out to Altus Esports, the Chiefs, Logitech G, Astro Gaming, Modem Simulation, Cube Controls, and Cams for all the support. And yeah, cheers.
Nah, very good job, Jackson, and well done on getting the sponsors correct this time as well. Lockie, back to you. I believe you're standing by with our race winner.
Yes, our round winner for round number 1 of the speedcafe.com GT3 Eseries. Congratulations to Job Stewart. Job, an exemplary performance from you tonight. Pretty much controlled the race from start to finish, but didn't look as easy from inside your car as what it looks for us on TV.
No, it wasn't very easy at all. I had to push pretty hard the whole race, and yeah, it was pretty hard with fuel as well because it was just on the edge, so I had to fuel save a fair bit. But yeah, it was a pretty fun race.
Talk us through the start, because you managed to get to the lead very early on with that move on Craig Edwards.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I got the jump on Jackson through turn 1, and then Craig Edwards, he made a few mistakes throughout the first couple laps. So yeah, I caught up to him pretty quick and got past luckily.
So obviously a bit of pressure for you to deal with at the safety car race starts, particularly the second of the safety car race starts. You had Andre Heimgartner, and there are a few other cars a bit further back that had elected to take tyres at their pit stops as well. What was the reasoning behind your decision not to take fresh tyres at your pit stop?
I just thought it would be better because the tyres take a fair bit in the GT cars, so I thought it would be better to try and get the gap out in front, which I did, but then the safety car came out and reeled everyone back in, so probably wasn't the best decision overall, but it worked out anyway.
We've seen that you've had some really good results lately in some of these sim racing competitions. You went well in the Erebus Junior Academy Series. We know that you're a regular participant in the Tuesday night Just Send It Series. And now, as the round winner for the opening round of the Speed Cafe Series, you've got a portable Kincrome toolbox heading your way as well. I'm sure there's some people that you would like to thank behind the scenes.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thanks to my team, Pursuit Sim Racing. They've helped me a lot through my sim, and thanks to Erebus Academy as well. And yeah, thanks to Kincrome for the toolbox. It's a great prize.
Awesome stuff. There he is, ladies and gentlemen, your overall round winner tonight, Job Stewart. A stellar performance from one of the young rising stars of the Australian sim racing scene. Hope you've enjoyed all of the action from the opening round of the GT3 Eseries presented by speedcafe.com and Kincrome. You've been watching it right here on speedcafe.com. We'll see you next week when we're off to Spa for round number 2. On behalf of Bo Albert, I'm Lockie Mansell. Bye for now.
This is fantastic. This is GT racing right now.
He's got traction, he's going in the outside, both of them! Maloney!
Oh, he's taking Anderson. Anderson's up to
Oh my God! Oh, big crash! Oh my goodness, half the field's gonna get rolled!
Second very close. These guys are want to make their way through the field very quickly.
Oh, there we go! Oh no!
That's massive! This is it! This is over! I can't believe this! Oh my God!
God, what?